Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
Ladies and gentlemen, Derek Lambert, host of MythVision podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here on this live. I'm going to bring our guest on in just a moment, but I want to roll out the red carpet. There are few academics in my career of doing this on YouTube that I have truly grown to bond with, to have a parent, uncle, brother bondship with, and really get to connect not only with them, but with their family, with their wife, with their daughter, with their cats. Okay. Like we really connected. And I really, in all the years that I've done these interviews with Dr. Robert M. Price, I've never got his story. Like I heard pieces of it. I know he was a pastor or he preached, but I never really got where he's from and the experiences he went through as a Christian and the experiences that he went through in academia as he left fundamentalism and started to explore other ideas, and the experiences that he went through from there to change his mind on this and change his mind on that and go from here and go from there to there. And so today I'm breaking the stigma. I'm bringing forward an old friend. I've rekindled something that I feel is long overdue. And so I hope that everybody in the chat is respectful and can enjoy trying to relate and connect to the story that'll be presented today by Dr. Robert M. Price. And once we're through, we'll take your super chats. We'll take your questions about Bible only. I'm not interested in going into any other material or any other stuff. I want to get back to business. I want to get back to educating the world and helping people find more freedom in whatever they believe. But all I know is that my learnings over the years about Bible from Dr. Price truly has helped me see the world in much of what I've learned about Bible in a way that if it weren't for him, I don't know if I would be where I'm at today. And so, rolling out the red carpet, we have our guest, Dr. Robert M. Price. Welcome back to MythVision, my friend.
Oh, great to be back. A homecoming. Yeah, great to renew our friendship and to work in the same vineyard of biblical understanding again.
Yes, sir. I miss you. I love you. I want to go on record and just say that up front. It's long overdue, and I'm thankful that we've rekindled things and we're getting back to business. So I hope we talked briefly off air about what I'd like to do in this dialogue. Really, it's more of a monologue, but I might chime in to help our audience maybe understand a little more details about your experience in your life. And so, first of all, links are in the description. You can check out his website, mindvendor.com. He's got a Patreon. He's got several books on Amazon. Want to get that out of the way. But Dr. Robert M. Price, can you tell us who you are, where you were born, who your parents were? Were they devout religious people, Catholic, Pentecostal? What kind of environment religiously were you born into? And let's do a testimonial today.
Well, I was raised in the Aztec faith of human sacrifice. No, I'm just kidding. But sometimes it feels that way. We lived in Mississippi. I was born in St. Dominic's Hospital in Jackson, and I don't know if it's even still there. I lived there with my older brother Byron and my parents till I was born in 1954, and just in the beginning of 1965, we pulled up stakes and moved to New Jersey for my father's new position. And that was a little bit of a culture shock, but we had loads more TV stations in New Jersey than we had in Mississippi, so that kind of softened the blow. In Mississippi, my parents were Southern Baptists, and so great was the crushing dawn to dusk and later set of duties they had. My parents met with my mom, Mabel McNair, being my dad, Noel Price's executive secretary at Mississippi Industries for the Blind, where they met. They were so busy all the time. They nonetheless made time for my brother Byron and me. They were great parents. I don't know how they got it all in, but they were so busy. I guess they did go to church, but they only made my brother and I sit through Sunday school, which was difficult enough. Well, when we moved to New Jersey, the closest Baptist church to us was a Conservative Baptist Association church. They were a more conservative split off of the Northern Baptists. And
how old were you there, Bob?
I was essentially 11. From there on in, I moved. We had moved to New Jersey, and I was involved in the.
I'm sorry, and we talked about this off air too, just so viewers know. If I'm chiming in or cutting Bob off, it's not to be rude. It's literally Bob and me talked about this. He's long-winded, but it's not just that. I really need the viewer to get with me and go on this ride because Bob, and your internet is also a little glitchy here and there. So forgive me. There might be a slight delay. But when, like, as you're telling your story, can you tell us when you really started taking your belief in Jesus, like, seriously? It wasn't just I went to Sunday school because of parents, but like when you converted and all that, like when it became more serious in what time in your life and stuff. So just be mindful as you're painting this narrative. Don't forget to give us that moment where you experienced or you had some type of conversion.
Well, I remember in elementary school in Jackson, there was like no church-state separation. They had evangelists come in, and this guy was asking who wanted to accept Jesus into their heart. And I remember thinking, what is this? I'd always heard, well, if you believe in God and Jesus, you'll go to heaven when you die. And it was never more complex than that. This struck me as, I've used the words, but maudlin and kind of wimpy and strange. So I really had no interest in it, but I certainly didn't have any antipathy toward Christianity. It was only once we moved to New Jersey and were at this solidly fundamentalist Conservative Baptist congregation that they would give an evangelistic invitation at the end of every service. In Sunday school, they would press that on kids and say, you got to accept Jesus into your heart as your personal savior. If you want to be saved. And that there, for some reason, it really struck me. And I thought, well, I don't want to be left out when the roll is called up yonder and so on. So I did earnestly pray with anxiety. Am I being sincere enough about this? And it really took then, and I was involved in the church junior high and then high school youth groups. We had creative people in charge of those, so luckily it was a lot of fun, and the pietism was genuine. And I was a nerd, and I had some friends in school. But the fact that I was a fundamentalist, and most of them were not, because New Jersey, you got Catholics, Jews, who knows what all there. I had my peer group of friends among the kids in the church youth group, and we did a lot of fun stuff. So I enjoyed that and tackled having a daily devotional reading of the Bible and prayer. I swallowed my embarrassment and engaged in witnessing, because after all, if I didn't, souls might perish in a Christless eternity. If you came on a bus, they'll wait on you. And I took that seriously, and I had a lot of anxiety and occasionally these periods of depression. And was
How
I
old were
doing
you?
God's will?
How old were you when
I'm
you
sorry.
felt that? When you experienced all that?
I'd say I must have been about 16 or so. Hadn't graduated yet, but it was close to that. And my whole life was taken up with the church, and it was wholesome. And there's almost nothing but good memories of good people and fun things back then. And the seed of doubt was planted one day in an evening youth group program where they showed some film strip about apologetics. I had never heard of this, and in it, it was dramatized. Some professor was showing on a blackboard evidence for the resurrection and how, yeah, we know really that Jesus rose from the dead, and he said he was the Son of God, and since he rose from the dead, that kind of proves his point, and so on. And I thought, wow, I always assumed this was just faith. You believed or you didn't. And of course, the plausibility structure of the South and so on was that it would have been very difficult to have doubts about it. Everybody thought so. Like, I'm not so sure about this law of gravity thing. I mean, it wasn't even a realistic thing to second guess it. But strangely, once I got onto the track of this apologetics thing, that, oh man, when I witness to people, this gives me ammunition to say this isn't just subjective. There is solid evidence that this is the way to go, and I did manage to persuade friends to pray and accept Christ and so forth, which was very good. Though it was still kind of neurotically obsessive, but luckily there was this fun element, good people. It didn't seem like, I was in some kind of weird cult or anything. And then once I got into college, a local college, Montclair State College, I attended the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship sessions and such, and I began to read apologetics, for one thing. John Warwick Montgomery was one of my favorites, and F.F. Bruce, Josh McDowell, and these guys, J.N.D. Anderson. And
So
this
you were
all sounded real good.
fundamentalist. You were fundamentalist, pretty much.
Yeah. And but the thing is, once I realized I was dealing in probabilistic arguments and evidence, that sort of destroyed the naivete of my own faith. I said, well, wait a minute.
We're jumping the gun, though. We're jumping the gun, though, Bob. We're getting ahead to where you actually start to doubt your faith. I want to hold off on the conclusion, just so that we understand you as a believer, and then eventually get to where you exit the naivete, if you will, if that's okay with you. You went to college. You're a fan of Josh McDowell, these guys. Let's hold off on the conclusion of exiting Christianity, if you don't mind, till we can get further.
And it wasn't an exit yet. It was the beginning of a process of trying to examine how sure can you be and on what basis. And after I majored in religion at Montclair State and in history and so forth. And that opened me up to interesting perspectives of comparative religion and anthropology of religion, psychology of religion. And I found that very mind expanding and not necessarily undermining faith. I thought, for instance, with sociology, this gives me ideas as to how Christians might better approach evangelism, to meet people where they are. And I was still solidly in the camp, and I became the president of the InterVarsity chapter. I was scheduling evangelistic concerts and Bible distributions on campus. But at the same time, I was discovering limited inerrancy and neo-evangelicalism. And I didn't. What I saw myself doing was moving into a more sophisticated and intellectually mature faith. And
Mhm.
it was now other people were around me were worried about this because I got to the point where I said, if I am honest with the Bible, I've got to admit there are some inaccuracies here. I mean, I didn't even know the tip of the iceberg yet, but I knew there were problems. Uh, any view of the Bible that said you could just ignore this stuff, something's wrong there. I don't
Mhm.
want to have blinders on. And so I would look for ways of believing in biblical authority and restricting the scope of it so it didn't foreclose scientific inquiry. Well, maybe as long as you're believing the gospel message and using the Bible as a guide to faith and practice, really, what else is the point? And so I
How old
began
are
to
you? Sorry to jump
and
in, but
now
how
I'm
old are you
talking
now?
about I would have been 20 to 22 in that
Okay. Okay.
era.
Got it. Got it.
And also, I was meeting Christian students at the school who were Catholics, Pentecostals, various other ones. And I liked that. I liked this broader, more ecumenical view. And so it seemed very good to me. But ironically, as I was masterminding the evangelistic outreach and so on, some of the other leaders began to be suspicious. You don't really believe in the full inerrancy of the Bible, do you? And they could kind of see where this might be headed. I didn't see it yet. But I went on into Gordon Conwell Seminary after I graduated college. And they, of course, mainly had ministerial students there, but you could also just take academic courses. And so I got a
Mhm.
master's of theological studies in New Testament and took courses in almost nothing else. And somewhere around the middle of that, two things converged for me. I began to think, the way I, as an evangelical Christian, deal with problems by not dealing with them and giving them to God and trusting Him to work things out, I began to say, you're kidding yourself. You're never going to mature. You can't have somebody do it. I used to speak of the Shazam model of sanctification. Billy Batson would say the magic word Shazam and become Captain Marvel with all these powers and all that. Well, I kind of thought that's what fundamentalism was telling me. You just need to invoke Christ or the Holy Spirit, and that'll work out. But they knew good and well that it was kind of bait and switch, because after you read those promises and found that it wasn't that simple, it didn't work like magic, which was inflated promising. I mean, I wouldn't blame
Yeah.
that on the Christian faith. Then I began to find books where more psychologically savvy evangelical leaders would say, well, Christians are still people too, humans. We have problems. It's better not to deny that. And I said, well, wait a second. This was sold to me as the panacea for everything. The Holy Spirit will do it and all that. Now I find that no, it doesn't produce a born again super race. And of course, I didn't blame the Christian faith. I just thought I'm in a version of it that is. It's all salesmanship, making the
Hmm.
product look good. And hey, look at this car with all the options here. Surely this is the one you want. And then the second thing that was converging was again the apologetics thing, because I had always been told, well, I read in apologists and others, that if you're a real Christian, you know what's going on here. You don't need to bother yourself with these people that have gone off the deep end and now they're denying miracles. They say the Gospels have myth and so on. That's a lot of bunk. And none of them would even say this if they had real faith. They're
Real quick,
corrupted
Bob.
by their naturalistic presuppositions and so on.
Okay, so you're 20 something. you came out of the kind of fundamentalism I know I've come out of, where I believed that it was magical. Like you would almost be able to say a prayer and God should answer it. I mean, if you ask for bread, will God give you a stone? You know, these kinds of things. And you're in college, you're coming across, just so I understood what you were saying here, you're coming across people that are saying that there's half myth, there's a lot of stuff that's legendary in the Gospels. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because like InterVarsity, to their credit, knew they couldn't just leave simple believers in college to their own devices. And they said, now you're going to hear people like Bultmann and so on that say it was mythology and so on. Well, let's forewarn and forearm you. And so I thought, good, that was fascinating stuff. But then when I was at Gordon Conwell, I began reading The Other Side. And I realized that the apologists had not told me the whole story. And again, I'm not trying to make them deceivers or swindlers, but this is the only side they knew. They just couldn't take the other perspective seriously. But what this did was to debunk arguments that I had learned to use. Here's why we ought to believe Jesus rose from the dead, and so on and so on. And here's why we ought to accept the authority of the Bible, despite the fact that the contents were determined by votes of a bunch of clerics and ecclesiastics we know little about, but it was the Holy Spirit guiding them. That's just like when the white smoke goes up from the Vatican chimney. Yeah, we can be sure the Holy Spirit picked the right guy, even though it took 6 votes to determine. Come on. And so eventually I realized you had to look behind the curtain and see the great and powerful Oz was just a guy with a special effects machine. And yet I still knew that there was depth to liberal and other theology.
Right. Oh, pause right here. Pause right here. Sorry. Okay. I want to convey my relation here, and my experience was the same. We were told about these ideas, but it was always like a straw man version, or it wasn't really giving you the full admission to what the other side is teaching pertaining to legend and contradictions and comparative mythology and you name it, right? It's always, no, he's not comparable. He's greater. There's always something that they didn't really fill us in on. And part of me wonders if that's intentional, because there might be other motives depending on the person. I can't read all the minds, but I know that for me, there was a sense in which I was told never to go to the other side. Don't listen to these guys. Don't listen to any of them. And then at some point, like you said, I noticed that once I started looking at it, that they had better arguments. They had better reasons for why they thought what they thought. And it opened up a different world. And I'm sure we're going to get into that world with you. But I must admit that saying don't do that, for me, I'm the kind of guy who goes, hold on, let me see what they're talking about so that at least I can know what they're saying. It's curiosity killed the cat kind of thing. So you're in college, you're coming across like other people, Bultmann and others. You are now reading them, I mean, because you were told about them, probably some version that was always vilifying, because you don't want your people to go down and open their minds and become more liberal Christian. Did you get persuaded as soon as you started reading them that their stuff actually made better sense than what you came out of? Or tell us a little bit about who you were reading when you were leaving out of a fundamentalist kind of mindset, the Joshua McDowells and the others. You know what I mean?
Well, I was reading some few works. Well, Paul Tillich really impressed me. He did talk about the biblical stories as myths, but he said you don't just junk these. They communicate on a more profound level. And he had such a profound understanding of the psychology of faith and so on. Even as a dyed-in-the-wool evangelical, I thought, this guy has a lot to teach me. But then with the like demythologizing, he was into that too, but Bultmann's the one you usually think of. I think a major turning point was, you know how the apologists always say, these critics have a philosophical presupposition that miracles cannot and therefore do not happen. C.S. Lewis attacks him for this even. And I thought, well, yeah, that's a circular argument. You got to be open to the possibility and then look at the evidence and see what comes of it. But what I didn't know was that you can't do that with any kind of straight historical method, which is based on the principle of analogy. You have to assume that you weren't there, you don't know what did or didn't happen. But if you have stories where a guy miraculously multiplies food or walks on the water, you never see this happen today. And why not? If God is the same yesterday, today, and today, there's no shadow of turning with him. Well, they needed that kind of proof then. What, it's 2,000 years later and we don't need it as much? And so I thought that this is, they don't see the problem. They can't think out of the box. And it's not as if, I really want to be fair, somebody like Montgomery, who I've corresponded with, I still admire him and his wit and his knowledge and all that. But people like him, you can't really expect them to be open to throwing over the whole thing their life is based on. And it simply cannot appear to them that it's plausible that the gospel stories, the Bible stories are myths. They just can't think out of the box. And it's not like they're saying, well, I'm going to have to pretend to believe this because I don't want to have to line up at the soup kitchen. Now,
right.
I don't think it's that way. Certain things look plausible or not, and with Visitzim Laban, so I began to realize that, and that I can explain why they are misrepresenting the other side unwittingly with sophisticated knowledge. These guys weren't a bunch of bums. I mean, there were kind of stupid fundamentalist preachers that just didn't know anything, but those weren't the people I was reading. I mean, that's just kid stuff anyway. But that made me really change my view. And I would say already in the middle of my Gordon Conwell years, where I was working on this New Testament degree, I changed and said, well, this just is not viable intellectually, and I'm going to have to undertake even more wide reading of different theologies and approaches to the Bible. And I learned an awful lot. And then when I had that degree, Billy Graham spoke at our graduation, and it was a real evangelical Protestant place. But once I got done with that, I enrolled in Drew University back in New Jersey. Gordon Conwell's in Massachusetts. And let's see, there I was studying Schleiermacher and Tillich and all of these guys, and the psychology of religion and so on and so on. And I got a PhD degree in systematic theology there. And a few years after that, I got a teaching position at Mount Olive College in North Carolina, and Carol and I moved down here for that.
Do you still believe at that time?
Well, for a good while at that point, I would describe myself as sort of an agnostic about the supernatural, but I wasn't just a pat atheist. There's a great mystery to the universe, and
so you believed something potentially. You weren't 100% sure. You had obviously humbled your knowing what is the case. Mm-hmm. What happened? I mean, what would you say before we move forward into the later days? What in your mind made you start questioning that they didn't happen, the stories didn't happen, that Jesus didn't really rise from the dead? Who did you read that made you think that was the case?
I guess one of the first people I read was Reginald Fuller in his book, The Formation of the Resurrection Narratives. And he took a form critical approach to it and showed how the different stories in the Gospels and the list of appearances of the risen Christ in 1 Corinthians 15, how these assumed the literary form they did because of a particular use to which they must have been put in the early church. And when you start thinking of it that way, you begin to realize, well, maybe they didn't simply remember things that came in handy for liturgical or ethical or homiletical reasons. Maybe these things were created that way, like we would have sermon illustrations or something. I really do not go along with the idea that these people were liars and hoaxers, that it was all priestcraft. I mean, we know that that's existed in the history of all religions, but I knew better than to just dismiss it all that way. And also, I read people like Archbishop Temple, kind of an open-minded, conservative Anglican bishop who gave a pretty interesting philosophical account of there being some sort of a God, but it wasn't just read out of the Bible. It wasn't simply Jehovah who commanded genocide and what kind of upholstery to have in the tabernacle and all that stuff. And so that made me think, well, yeah, I can see that there is what Rudolf Otto called the holy, some sort of sacred reality that mystics experience, greater than personhood. And that struck me as being a viable option for a kind of Christian belief. You didn't need to get into the nursery material. But eventually I began to think, what am I saying that there is a purely spiritual, non-material reality that is beyond the senses and matter, and that somehow God, that I think it was Auguste Comte who said that kind of philosophy is just cloudy mythology. And I thought, son of a gun, I think that's right. You're just making it blurry and vague so you can affirm it, whatever it is. And you're not really talking about the biblical deity anymore. And if you start talking about Jesus the way Tillich did, or the process theologians and all that, in a very philosophical way, it's like what David Strauss said about Schleiermacher's Christology. Schleiermacher, everything had to be naturalistically explicable.
Rationalism, right? Like a rationalist explanation of Scripture,
yeah.
Correct? Yeah.
And though he did believe that religious experience put you in touch with God, but yeah, he was a rationalist to the point of believing in the swoon theory. He spoke of Jesus reviving in the tomb, and he spoke of the second life of Jesus that came to an end shortly thereafter. But that's all right, because he says the thing that was a veritable incarnation of God in Jesus was the totality of God consciousness in him. Unlike us slobs who were taken up with mundane cares and all that, Jesus at every minute was totally God conscious. How would you know that? Well, of course, you're just trying to figure out some schema that wouldn't be overtly supernatural, but would be extraordinary. Yeah, that must have been it. And I began to think, this is just making Jesus into a cipher, which the Council of Nicaea and all those guys had already done. I mean, yeah, Jesus Christ must have had a divine nature and a human nature that inhered together in one person, but the personhood came from the divine side, and the two natures were inseparably united, but never mixed or confused. How do you know that? I mean, you're just making it up. You're just trying to cook up a Christology. There's nothing that says that in the Bible, as if that would settle it. So the more I got into it, the more of a human creation I thought it was. And I've never come to the point of saying, what a lot of malarkey. I was just I was a sucker. No, you put away childish things, and you may find that it holds no more attraction for you, though I didn't come to that conclusion. My life ever since has been consumed with the study of religion and the Bible, which I love. I don't pretend to know anything about God, but how could you if there is one? What do you, Karl Barth used to say, when the angels see me coming, they nudge one another in the ribs, say, oh, look at this, there's Karl Barth with this little red wagon full of theology books. There's a guy that had intellectual humility. I take it further than that, but to me, worship is the sense of wonder at the amazing things in the world, like human reproduction or the scale of the universe.
Right.
This stuff's astounding. Does it prove there's a God? That's rushing the issue. You can never really know that, but to live under the vast canopy of inexplicable, glorious reality, I don't see any problem with that. I don't have predestination, resurrection. Who knows?
Right. Okay. So there's some good stuff. You name dropped, Strauss, David Friedrich Strauss, of course. So I'm trying to get you to go back into the cobwebs and see, when did you come across the Schweitzers, the David Friedrich Strauss, the classical brilliant minds that kind of paved the way to inspire us today, really, to drive home apocalyptic Jesus? Because what I'm wanting the audience to do with us here, as we're going through your exiting of faith, I want to gear it in a direction of getting down into the weeds of, you believe there was a Jesus. You believe there was a guy. You believed that, even if he didn't walk on water at this point, clearly you've come to realize legend and mythology and stuff. You are absolutely going to, you're going to move into questioning the historicity of Jesus. What led you to that? So who are the scholars? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because for a good while, I keep mentioning Goldman because he's a great example of a bunch of these things. He said that, well, you'd have to be insane to deny that there was a historical Jesus, and it appears that from the little we can know about him, setting aside the fabricated stuff in the Bible, it seems that he was an apocalyptic prophet, that he was predicting that the end of the world was quickly on its way and you'd better repent. And he said, now, of course, he was wrong in that, but it didn't really matter, because if you demythologized it, the point is, you don't have to wait for the final judgment. You stand naked before the all-seeing eye of God now. You don't think you're kidding anybody. And that made some sense to me. It seems a little vague now, but this was beginning to look good to me, even when I was at Gordon Conwell in the last semester I was there. I was reading a bunch of stuff that probably my professors
in your
had read.
Early 20s.
Yeah.
In your early, okay. And you were coming across this kind of skeptical stuff. And were you a Schweitzer fan? I know you were a David Friedrich Strauss fan. You're still a David Friedrich Strauss. Who isn't? I mean, in our arena. So what happened? What really made you go, maybe this guy didn't exist? Like, can you lead us through some of that literature and the scholars that made you think about this stuff?
The first mythicist book I read, this was in the mid 80s when I was teaching at Mount Olive College. The G.A. Wells, he wrote a bunch of books on this, but the one I read was The Jesus of the Early Christians. And I think I had read it once before and thought the guy was too extreme. And I had all kinds of notes written in the margin. Yes, but so-and-so. Well, I read it again, and now I had a different experience. I thought, wait a minute, I think I see his point. And I tried to incorporate this into the lecture notes of a Life and Teaching of Jesus class I was teaching to be fair. I wanted to really put everything on the table. Well, it was um, several years, maybe 7 or 8 after that, I began to think maybe there wasn't even a historical Jesus. And what did that was I read a bunch of books by John Dominic Crossan, like Who Killed Jesus and The Cross That Spoke, especially those two. But other ones, I think Wolfgang Roth about the Gospel of Mark being based on Old Testament material, and Randall Helms's Gospel Fictions, and Thomas L. Brody, his dissertation on how Luke Acts seems to be rewritten from the Deuteronomic Elijah and Elisha materials. And these
Luke
guys
Acts
went into
or Mark. Sorry to interrupt. Luke, I thought it was Mark that he wrote that of.
Oh, he eventually widened the net, but he started with this dissertation on Luke. And there was enough of this. I kind of kept a ledger with the arguments that I thought were convincing, because not all of them are. I mean, a lot, like in Dennis MacDonald's thing about Mark and Homer, which I read a little later. Not every argument he gives is totally convincing, but he knows that. And he's saying, if you start with the ones that are, like the Gerasene demoniac being the Cyclops and all that, there's several of those, the death of John the Baptist and that of Agamemnon. Those are so striking that it makes you take a second look at the ones that aren't dead giveaways, but you think, I wonder if this is the case too. Well, I compiled all of these Old Testament and some other Hellenistic source materials, as it seemed to me, and comparing them with the Gospel and Acts narratives. Only the arguments I thought were really provocative. And it seemed to me at the end of this was eventually published, by the way, in an Encyclopedia of Jewish Scripture Interpretation. It was a long essay of mine called New Testament Narrative as Old Testament Midrash. And it was eventually reprinted in my book, The Christ Myth Theory and Its Problems. And what I had come up with was the conclusion that virtually every gospel story and several in Acts could very plausibly be taken as Christian rewrites of Old Testament stories about Joshua, David, Moses, Elijah, Elisha, and a couple of others. And you could point out the various points of similarities. And I said to myself, what are the chances that one guy actually did these things, including miracles, or that people were rewriting scriptural stories that everybody knew by heart? And years later, I was corresponding with Marcus Vincent, and I said, what do you think of this? My guess is that if you're right, and Marcion was the first to write a gospel, he was the one that rewrote the Old Testament hero stories. I know he rejected the Old Testament, but he didn't hate it. He didn't think it was evil. It just wasn't about Jesus. But he could certainly see the value in it. So what do you think? Did he rewrite these stories with Jesus as the main character? And to my great relief, Vincent said, that's exactly what I think. So once I reached that point, that was the turning point. Everything we read about him not only parallels in an eerie fashion Old Testament stories, but even if you didn't know that, everything in the Gospels fits the mythic hero archetype, or Oedipus, the Buddha, Alexander the Great, etc., etc. What are the chances? There's nothing left over. I mean, it could be that there was.
Oh, no, please finish your sentence.
I mean, like you can see that these myth patterns have affected the stories of Alexander the Great and Caesar Augustus, who were historical figures, but we know that because they are so inextricably rooted in the history of their time, whereas Jesus is not. even the few places where it seems like the Jesus character fits into history, he's associated with Herod the Great, Herod Antipas, Caiaphas, Pilate. Even those stories are very suspicious on other grounds. Pilate is depicted in a way that Philo and Josephus would never depict him as I got to get this Jesus off the hook. He'd have never done it. He swatted him like a fly. And Herod the Great, this story about the slaughter of the innocents is just like Pharaoh and Moses in the Nativity, but nothing in Josephus about it, and so on. Or the high priest, he's getting together for a kangaroo court trial on Passover Eve. So whoever wrote this just wasn't thinking, and it just couldn't be historical. So Jesus really does not collide with history, much less being integrated into it. So I figured, look, there might have been a Jesus. I'll never know, but it seems to me the burden of proof is on the one who says there was.
Okay, I'm glad you finished your sentence, because you know as well as I know, like the majority of academics will try to find some gradient view of legend. There's history, there's probably underlying kernels or oral tradition, or there was something there, and then they made these stories up. Or they whole cloth invented some of the stories, which they're willing to grant, right? They're willing to grant like episodes occasionally, but most of the time there's like a historical kernel. He was on a hill. He, gave his, he gave teachings on a hill over here on the hillside and stuff. And you always poetically make kind of fun of that in a way where you're always like, oh, okay, so we strip away, we Thomas Jefferson the Bible, and then what happens? You've got what left, right? He said a few things on the side of a hill. He pat a few guys on the back. I mean, he yelled at a few people inside the temple. But like you said, all of these episodes you discovered through academics and researching various voices. I mean, probably hundreds of different brilliant minds. And you kind of piece together and realize almost, if not every episode, can be easily explained as legend or mythology. So in your mind, you're more persuaded that there's probably that happening, but you grant that there could be this,
course,
mythologizing of a historical dude that was running around in Galilee and down in Jerusalem, got himself killed, potentially rebel. We talked about that in the past. Right?
Oh, yeah. It's just that the mere possibility doesn't make it the most probable thing, much less proving it. Like with the thing where maybe it's just Old Testament coloring of the stories. I addressed that in the debate with Bart Ehrman, and I said, well, wait a minute. If you take away the Old Testament coloring, you got a window dressing, but nothing in the window. There's no story left if you take away the part that made it look like the Elijah or Moses story. And right. It seems to me that it's just inertia, or like the way they claim that mythicists just do surgical exegesis, that the passages like the reference to James, the brother of the Lord, and all that, that stuff must have been interpolations. Oh, come on, he says, and others like him say that you're just cutting out the stuff that would debunk your theory. Well, I showed that if you track down who first came up with those interpolation theories, none of those scholars were mythicists. They had other grounds for doing it. And so that, plus, they're willing to say that about the Testimonium Flavianum in Josephus, right? They say, well, this paragraph about Jesus in a non-Christian source, okay, it does look a little too good to be true, but if we cut out the various sentence halves and such, then we can say that he could have written the rest of it, so he did, and bingo, there's evidence for Jesus. You're just doing the same damn thing. You're just doing cosmetic surgery to make bad evidence into good evidence. It's just cheap, like it's what Albert Schweitzer called the twisted and fragile thinking of Christian apologetics. You should know better.
Okay, so usually there's different mythicists. Dr. Carrier has a different angle in which he approaches this whole thing and comes to a conclusion in thinking there might never have been a Jesus.
Hmm.
You, it seems, took a different path, though you saw all these various views, I suspect. Before we move into Paul, which I think is an important issue to tackle as it relates to your form of mythicism, what kinds of mythicism, you said G.A. Wells, but like what various forms of mythicism attracted you over the years, and what about the angelic one of Carrier's? Because I think his was a little later, right? Were you already a mythicist well before this position was postulated, or maybe you
No,
described
that's been important in my thinking. I've written some stuff about that, indicating how this would have been a natural evolution of the idea of the angel of Yahweh appears usually in a non-material but human-like form to various Old Testament characters, and they're surprised when he reveals himself and realizes that he wasn't even made of flesh, couldn't eat the food offered him, and so on, and that. As Margaret Barker pointed out, Jesus in the New Testament is always often called the Son of God, Theos, the Greek substitute for Elohim, the Son of God, but he is not one time called the Son of the Kurios, the Son of the Lord, which is would have been the substitute for Yahweh, as it is in the Septuagint and so on. The name itself is too holy, so they'll use a generic one. Well, why is that? Why is Jesus never called the Son of Yahweh? Well, because he is Yahweh. You go back before the so-called Deuteronomic reform, they believed that the Ancient of Days, the God Most High, El Elyon, was the creator, but that his throne was shared, or he was replaced as the king of the gods by Yahweh, the warrior god and storm god, who earned his position by defeating the chaos dragons, Leviathan, Rahab, who were mentioned several times in the Old Testament, just
and in
like
the book of Revelation,
in Babylonian myths.
I was going to say in the Apocalypse of John, Jesus is literally defeating the chaos dragon. I mean, literally a Leviathan myth being recycled. So, that could be.
That's right. He even shows up in Revelation. So if that's the case, that would mean that early Christians, as Barker suggests, understood Jesus to have been Yahweh come to earth. Well, that would, given the idea of the angel of Yahweh coming to earth throughout the Old Testament, you got docetism built in already. The whole idea that Jesus is the angel of Yahweh on an extended, though not very long, mission to earth. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And he would have been an eternal or at least pre-existing being. And then there are a few bits and pieces scattered through the epistles and Revelation that have strange sounding things, like he was put to death by the principalities and powers and by the archons of this age, and that he redeemed us with his blood before the foundation of the earth. What? I mean, there you go. Before there was a planet Earth, there's the heavenly crucifixion of Jesus. So it seems to me that is a very strong case for a mythical Jesus. Who knows, though, right? I admit it's simply a theory.
It's a really interesting way to view this, Bob. By the way, your internet, I'm telling you, the devil is at work on your internet tonight in terms of pixelation. So listen, for those who don't know, Dr. Price is docetic. He is here in spirit form. Eat this, Bob. Eat it.
No, sorry, can't. No digestive system.
See, it doesn't work. But I wish your internet was better when we're streaming, but it's okay. It's okay. Chronologically, historically, the mythicism that you find from Doherty and Dr. Carrier, were you already publishing and writing on this prior to them coming forward with their ideas?
I guess I was, because I know, though, Earl's books were constantly eye-opening to me. I mean, I felt like I was one of the guys on the road to Emmaus with him pointing out stuff I had never noticed. But mythicism wasn't new to me. I just I was attracted to his work because, oh, here's another mythicist. I'm not quite sure. It was not long before then, because it was during this long reading program of collecting every book I could find on Old Testament passages and what relation they might have had to the Gospels.
Dr. Tabor in the house. Thank you, Dr. Tabor. Great to see a wonderful program. Love and appreciate you, Dr. Price. Love the one-liners. Same here.
Oh,
same
thank
here.
you.
Yeah. Okay.
Now there's James, the brother of the Lord.
There you go. There you go. So let's get into Paul. Let's get into Paul, because you've admitted, and I'm not the one who said it, you're the one who said it, that you have come to what people like to call crazy idea about Paul. So I want to have fun, rehash old topics, but also as it connects to mythicism. We find characters. You brought up the road to Emmaus. Cleopas. Cleopas doesn't look to be a historical figure. The name means it implies glory of the Father. And in fact, what's ironic about this name, as I was reading Bruce Loudon, he finds that he thinks there's a dialogic relationship between Luke 24, the passage to Emmaus in Luke, in Odyssey 1 or 2, the scene where Telemachus is fleeing for his life from the suitors, and on his journey, I can't remember why he's traveling, but there's a mentor who's actually Athena in disguise, and Athena, he's doubting, right? He's like, man, they're like wanting help from the gods, right? They don't even realize there's a god or goddess right there the whole time, right? And he cries out to, like, I hope that they'll help me like to help my father. And Athena, the mentor, I can't remember the name, said something like, as the gods helped your father from afar, it was a pun on his name, Telemachus, which means something from afar. I can't remember the actual meaning of the name, but it literally plays the same pun on a name that you see in Luke, and the way that Bruce Loudon wrote it was fascinating. Here's the point. Cleopas is an invented figure, just like Telemachus is an invented figure. The name has power, meaning like a name in the Bible. Isaac has laughter, and you would have these names as myths. Getting to Jesus, you just portrayed some of the ideas that made you question his historicity. You also gave us models in which we might view this divine figure in the myth. But a lot of scholars like Bart Ehrman, you're on a different planet. You're talking over here on Jupiter, and he's on Mars. And because you have other presuppositions, he already sees Paul as like solid bedrock. And I know that this doesn't work all the way, because Carrier also holds to the idea that Paul existed and there are 7 authentic letters and stuff. He just interprets it as an angelic, apocalypse within, with this heavenly angel named Christ, or Joshua, if you will, Jesus. What do you do with Paul? Because I think we need to wrestle your Dutch radical stuff. Like, what made you stop thinking there are real 7 authentic? Because I imagine you believed that at one point. And why question Paul historically? I read those letters, and to this day, Bob, I read it and I go, it feels like there's a frustrated guy on the other end of this papyri, probably writing and getting, like, it feels real to me, but feelings don't prove anything. So what did you do that made you, like Nina found, certain epistolary fiction that, she found her way to her conclusion. What about you?
Well, I tend to combine elements of what she says, that it was the Pauline corpus, at least the Marcionite 10 epistles, that must have been published together as an edifying collection, but not written by one hand, because I think you just cannot ignore the many factors that F.C. Bauer, Bruno Bauer after him, W.C. van Manen, and the other Dutch radicals pointed out, that the same criteria that made Bauer disqualify First and Second Thessalonians, well, everything but the four Hauptbriefe, First and Second Corinthians, Romans, and Galatians, as spurious. That if you apply that consistently, you would have to say none of them are authentic because the same problems occur. For instance, in Galatians, you've got Paul, whoever, saying, "Hey, look, I'm under no one's authority. I didn't derive my gospel from any mortal source. It came to me directly from the Lord by revelation." But then, if you take a look at 1 Corinthians 15. Here's what I gave you as of first importance, which I received from the ones before him, and it's the resurrection appearances and how they fulfilled Scripture and all that. Wait a minute, I thought he didn't receive it from any human hand, but directly as a revelation from Christ. And then you think of the Clementine homilies and so on, where you have Simon Magus versus Simon Peter, exactly on that point. Simon Magus, who sounds remarkably like Paul, is salvation by grace, the Torah given by angels, etc. He is saying that he had definitive revelation spiritually from Christ, whereas Peter and the others, there's many a slip twixt the cup and the rib, the cup and the lip. That they heard Jesus, but look at what the Gospel of Mark said. These guys are empty-headed buffoons who misconstrued everything Jesus said. It's in the Gospels themselves. And he says, if you hear it in a vision, it's got to be true. That sounds like the same opposition. If Paul wrote the thing in Galatians, he certainly didn't write the thing in 1 Corinthians 15 or vice versa. Take your pick. And even within, let's just zero in on 1 Corinthians, it's almost accurate to say that every other chapter refutes the one before it. Topics come up one by one. Can women speak prophetically in the assembly? According to chapter 7, I think it is, or chapter 10, I forget, they can, but according to chapter 14, they can't. Can apostles live off the largesse of their congregations? Oh, yes, of course. And he gives Old Testament arguments for this. But he says, now, of course, I don't do that, and here's why. And then, can Christians eat food previously offered to pagan gods? I wouldn't do it. God killed people for doing less in the Old Testament. Oh, of course you can. You know that these gods don't exist. And we don't preach sophisticated wisdom, only Christ on the cross. But in fact, we do preach wisdom to the elite again and again and again in the 1 Corinthians. It seems to me what you have is a kind of a digest of rival Paulinist or Marcionite views that have just been compiled in the fashion of a topical Bible. Dave's topical Bible. What topic you're interested in? Here's all the passages. Good luck harmonizing them, but there they are. My teacher, Darrell Dowdy, pointed out something I should have thought of. He says, you read any commentary on any Pauline epistle, and it's all taken up with trying to find a consistent thread of argument. Wait a minute, how does this paragraph lead into that one? What's the connection? Does he mean so-and-so? It's not obvious. Look, didn't you learn your lesson from the synoptic gospels, like the Sermon on the Mount? There's no consistent theme in that. It's just a bunch of sayings crammed together. That's why it's no single sermon. It's just an organizing device. Why don't we recognize the same thing in the epistles? It's an artificial crazy quilt, a patchwork quilt of various bits and pieces. Now, that's analogous to what Marcus Vincent says about the Gospels, right? That Marcion rewrote the Old Testament stories into Jesus narratives. And he said, don't spread this thing around. I'm not done with it. But his students said, "Oh, this is great stuff. I can't hide my light under a bushel. Hey, don't share this with anybody. But look at this. It's hot stuff." And what happened? They said, "This is great, but you could add something else and make Jesus this." Speak about this and that. And so there were pirate editions by guys named Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that were based on the original Marcionite gospel, but with various other little bricks added to the wall. Well, that's pretty much the same thing I think must have happened with the Apostolicon, the set of 10 letters published by Marcion. He had the one gospel, he had the one set of epistles, and so it's not like Seneca with the moral epistles, like Lindsay's talking about. Mm-hmm. It's not like C.S. Lewis sitting down as Screw Tape, writing all those letters with a single style and so forth. It's rather a scrapbook, but it's the same thing that wound up in the Gospels, where Marcion borrowed stuff from the pirate editions and added them. So he was even compiling stuff. So to me, you can combine the old Dutch radicalism with what she is saying, and it improves and clarifies both versions and answers many questions that the standard straight reading cannot answer.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot there. Nina does credit many of the Dutch radicals for her
yes, he
inspiration.
Does, yes.
Would
She's
you say?
Brilliant.
Oh yeah, very very nice. Appreciate listening to this new perspective too, because I like hearing different takes when it comes to scholarly ideas like this. Do you think that you reading the Dutch radicals is what tipped you over the edge? And I guess this is a hypothetical, but do you think that if more students really studied the radicals, going back to their studying on Paul, without the tidal wave of pressure within academia about Paul and how to view him and how to understand the seven and how to this, that, do you think that there'd be a lot more people going down at least a path of doubting those seven?
Well, that's beginning to happen. When Darrell Dowdy and I did a couple of papers for the Paul Seminar, the West Star Institute, they said we were crazy. We practically got laughed out of the room. But Nina, I shouldn't say that, I don't know her personally, Dr. Livesey, she is in that same subsection of the West Star Institute, and they're listening to her. This was like 20 or more years ago with us, so things are changing. And I think it's good, because it's not like you don't get any information about early Christianity, either from the Dutch radical view or hers. Certain issues are being addressed. Certain situations are being discussed. Maybe the stuff didn't happen in the first century or in Corinth or Thessalonica, but you can kind of tell what's at stake. So it's not like, oh, no, you're ruining it. But they seem to think you can. It's the big name. That Jesus, well, what the heck, we're Protestants. We don't really care what Jesus said. Paul is the guy that educates us about Christian belief. So, okay, we'll let you have 6 of those as non-Pauline, but you can't say anything against the big 7. Why not? All critical New Testament scholars admit that none of the documents with Peter's name on them go back to him. 1st and 2nd Peter, or outside the canon, the Apocalypse of Peter, the Gospel of Peter, the preachings of Peter, and so on and so on. 3rd and 4th epistles of Peter. Nobody gives him the time of day. If that is the case, and none of that stuff is by Peter, he was just seized upon as a big name. It's like Paul says to the Stoics, why should it be considered impossible among you that all of them could, that Pauline epistles actually say, now don't listen to any epistle allegedly from us saying so and so, and it says, here's my signature in big letters, which of course he would never say if they were actually reading an autograph. He wants you to understand, oh, they weren't reading this, we don't have the autographed copy. Neither did anybody else, because there wasn't one. And that implies that already it was taken for granted that people were cranking out the Pauline epistles.
I like this thinking, by the way. Richard C. Miller and I have talked about this in depth, and we hang out on the phone all the time. And Dr. Miller will say, Derek, look at the myth-making factory, right? He's like, it's a factory. Notice that there's a constant new Acts of John, Acts of Peter, Acts of Paul, Acts of this, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary, Gospel of such and such, such and such, such and such, such and such, and Epistle of so-and-so, Epistle of so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. And he's like, when are we going to, like, why do we pretend, not saying that there couldn't have been some bedrock letters, but like, why do we then just come back and go, bedrock ones, we know these ones are authentic when we have all the others? And I've heard arguments from scholars who will say some of them are obvious, that it's so ridiculous, whereas at least Paul's letters at least don't have that level of fictitious, embellishment, clothing on them, so to speak. But he has a really good point, because I see the minds of like a critical scholar who's reading Acts and they go, okay, this is clearly like some form of fictional history or historical fiction. And then I can go to Paul's letters and you feel like it's a little bit more real in a way. It has this realistic-ish feel compared to what you would read in a narrative like Acts. And typical critical scholars will differentiate between that, right? But it doesn't make Acts not fictional. They accept that. When I go to these extra canonical or beyond the canon text and I'm reading Acts, I'm like, this is fictive. But why do we do that with Paul, right? These are mundane letters dealing with corrections and disputes and philosophical teachings. Another thing, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but one more comment. Stanley Stauer's book on rereading Romans. I recently mentioned this to Nina Livesey, and it was just really awesome to hear a different take about the entire book of Romans from his view. And I never knew that in Romans 7, that famous sermon that pastors would say about the struggle, the thing I don't want to do is the thing I end up doing, and the thing I do, that teaching, or that we thought Paul was talking about his own actual struggles, is actually based off of a quote from Medea. A quote from Medea. You got to, if you don't have the book, I'll have to try and see if I can't get it to you. But I was shocked to find out Paul in Romans 7 is quoting Medea material, right? And there's a lot of overlap between him, Plutarch, the way that they philosophize and teach, and their rhetoric. And this is why when I read Nina's book and I was thinking, oh, dang, this is a bubble popper here, because I really never realized how much, I thought about the Colossal Apostle book, and I was like, I never really knew and grasped the gravity and the depth of the past historical works that have been done on this, questioning the Pauline epistles and their authenticity. And now I'm like really taking serious, considering these arguments and wondering and working through my mind. Like, are these 7 really not authentic? You know what I mean? Like, so anyway, sorry for rambling.
I would recommend, if you want to pursue this, though reams of stuff were written by especially Van Manen, but others too, that in Dutch and German, they've never been translated because for obvious reasons, people don't want others reading that stuff. Or Bruno Bauer, almost nothing of his has been translated. But Van Manen did write a bunch of very detailed articles for the Encyclopedia Biblica in English. And I put together a volume of, I've missed one, but almost all of the articles he did about the letters. And the book is called A Wave of Hyper-Criticism, because that was a title of a review article somebody else wrote about it. And I'm sure it's still available on Amazon. And that will be eye-opening stuff. W.C. Van Manen, Vanmanen.
If you could get me those sources, this is the end of the road. I think in terms of like the journey, we've gone to the full extreme. Today, you would call yourself what? A skeptic? What would you call yourself, Bob?
A Bible scholar, even a theologian, since I dabble in that and have degrees in both of them. but I'm not a standard believer. But I love the Bible and I love Christianity and all the religions. I'm kind of like Joseph Campbell in that regard.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say I'm, I'm the next Joseph Campbell. I just mean that his stance sort of is what that seems to fit me. So I am a New Testament scholar and theologian, as pretentious as that sounds. And I do not consider myself an atheist any more than a theist. It's just way beyond that. Those are too tidy, too limiting concepts. I think I don't know about worship, but I do know about wonder. And that's where I'm at. I don't know if there's a God or a creator or whatever. I don't think you have to know.
You sound like a mystic. A mystic of the
Even
universe.
though I don't have trance or meditation stuff. I mean, I wish I
right,
did.
Right. Okay. So I just wanted to know where you were today, of course, as you've gone on this path we call life. Okay. I'm going to turn to super chats here, but Bob, fair warning. Again, you can be long-winded. Keep that in mind.
Ain't it the truth?
Well, I just say that because I know that a lot of people would love to hear your thoughts about some stuff here. And we can always pursue this down the road and pick up where we left off. So people are like, Bob needs a new camera. It's his internet. I promise you it's his internet. Bob, are you hooked up to the Wi-Fi? What's going on out there?
I am, but I've had trouble on and off for a long time. I don't know what the problem is.
It's so strange to me. Let me see if I can't lower the quality of the stream to 720. Maybe that'll help the pixelation so that it doesn't force your camera to try and keep up. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter.
Maybe a mercy that they're not distracted by having to look at my ugly mug. Forget about Medusa.
Okay, it's clearly not doing better. I'm just going to keep mine 1080. I think yours is going to be what it is. Let's go ahead and go to super chats. Again, thanks a lot. Questions about Bible. I'm only taking questions about Bible. And thank you again, Bob, for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. JC, thank you for the super chat. Was Saul renamed to Paul because Saul was, and I don't know this Hebrew, was Saul made small? And then you might need to look at this yourself because we're dealing with linguistics. And I don't know if you know any of this stuff. I know probably
not
Sumerian.
Hebrew, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am the Sumerian. I don't know about that at all. Hermann Dettering thinks that Saul, that the guy's name was actually Paul, but that Luke calls him Saul to try to tie him into the Old Testament tradition because Luke is Catholicizing. He's anti-Marcionite. And so he's trying to connect them up with Saul, son of Kish, who became a prophet. And all that. That's purely speculative, but could be the same, could be true. But who knows if he actually was called Saul? It's difficult to say. I tend to think, and this opens up another whole can of worms, I'm of the opinion that the historical Paul was Simon Magus.
I was going to ask you about that too. Without dwelling on it long, we might as well nail it because that was part of what I heard you say in passing about Paul. Sorry to jump in, but why not just maybe give a couple parallels, but like what really drives that for you? Is it the pseudo-Clementine material later that seems to give you inspiration on thinking that this may have gone back to an earlier 2nd century time? And anyway, to paint a quick narrative, if you will, for people on why you think Paul might be Simon Magus.
Well, for one thing, the Peter versus Simon exchange in the pseudo-Clementine sounds so strikingly like the Peter versus Paul, Paul versus Jerusalem business in the epistles that I just think this can't be mere coincidence, and especially as Gustav Volkmar, one of Bauer's students, pointed out, the business about Simon being converted and offering to pay Peter to teach him how to exercise the apostolic prerogative of conveying the Holy Spirit, which the whole point in Luke is that nobody but the Jerusalem apostles or their delegates can do it. Volkmar said, this sounds an awful lot like Paul collecting money from the Gentile converts to bring to Jerusalem, which was the condition for them recognizing his apostolic ministry in Galatians. And
so he'd pay his way in.
Help.
Like he'd pay his way in, so to speak.
Yeah, that it was tribute money. And we'll be glad to do that. You go your way, we'll go ours. But you got a lot of givers out there. How about kicking some of it to old Mother Church? Oh, that's fine. And then it turns out in Acts and anticipated in Romans, they don't take the money. Just as Peter refuses it when Simon offers it in Acts itself. Also, Josephus mentions a Simon who was a sorcerer, who was part of the entourage of Felix, Festus, Bernice, Drusilla, and Herod Agrippa II in Acts. And Paul is speaking to these people, and they kind of want to hear him and all that. And Eisenman pointed out that it sounds like Paul, if he was Simon, fits that it's just the round peg going into the round hole. Also in Acts, Paul is doubled as the sorcerer, again, Elymas, who in some manuscripts is instead called etoimas or atomos. And in Josephus, some manuscripts have etomas as well. And all of this implies that Paul, Saul, Elymas, Atomos, et cetera, were the same guy. And what happens to him in Acts? He goes blind temporarily because he opposes the gospel. And Eisenman has interesting stuff to say about this. Also, he connects it up with the Dead Sea Scrolls, that just as the Pseudo-Clementines make Simon the number one successor to John the Baptist in his 30-member sect, which sounds a lot like Qumran. He was in Egypt studying when John the Baptist died, and so Dositheus, the next guy in line, became the guru. When Simon came back, he had a dispute with this guy and took over, but then had a breach with the community because of his approach in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The smooth things business, letting the Gentiles in without all the Jewish laws and so on. It sure sounds like Paul, the Jerusalem church, et cetera, it fits together too well. And again, obviously, there's no smoking gun or bleeding sword or whatever you'd say. But it seems to me all of that stuff converges and even explains Docetism, because Irenaeus tells us that Simon Magus believed angels created the world and gave the Torah, as in the latter in Galatians, and that he claimed to have been crucified earlier in Jerusalem, though docetically, he didn't suffer. So he's claiming to be the reincarnation or second coming of Jesus, but a docetic Jesus. And then, I'm sorry, this is a total mess, but if you flip back to Qumran, what is the authority structure there? There are 12, symbolizing 12 tribes, and an inner circle of 3. Well, that's just like in the Jerusalem church. Were they the Qumran community? Was Paul the successor as Simon Magus to John the Baptist? I mean, it makes so much sense, though it is circumstantial evidence, but pretty powerful. And as theories go, that seems to me to be a very strong one. But as with mythicism itself, it remains only a theory. No historian has the right to say, I know this happened. No, you don't. We just have to weigh different possibilities.
So a couple things that come to mind. You bring up that the 10 letters of Paul seem to originate with the Marcionite school. What would that mean in terms of Marcionites' awareness of who Paul is? Wouldn't that mean that Marcion's aware of a Simon Magus or
That's
something
right.
like that? So,
in fact,
okay.
in the Amazing Colossal Apostle, I argue that Marcionism is already a kind of simpler version of Simonianism from what else we know about it. That it has relaxed the sexual asceticism that was really radical in Simonianism, so that they still have it, but with a kind of a second degree membership for the married. And so it seems to me, Simon is supposed to have had a disciple named Marcus, which is the same name as Marcion. And Stephen Huller says probably the same guy. So I deal with this in a lot of detail in the Amazing Colossal Apostle. One last thing, I do something I've never seen anybody else do. In the Amazing Colossal Apostle, I say, now I give a commentary, kind of a quick commentary on all the Pauline epistles from the standpoint of the Dutch radical school. But then in my, I think it's volume 3 of my Holy Fable series, I go through all of the Pauline epistles. I say, well, you can look at this other book for my preferred paradigm, but let's see how it looks if we take the Lucky 7 approach. And I say, well, that would make sense too. That's entirely plausible. You don't have to be an idiot to embrace that. But here you go. Here's what you decide what you think, which reading makes more sense, because ultimately that's all we can do. Yeah, let's try on this pair of glasses and that and see what makes the most sense.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, right? I like to hear the different takes because no one has it all for sure. And it sucks that you get laughed at for having new views. Someone screenshotted on Twitter the other day about a questionnaire in the blog on Bart Ehrman's blog asking about Nina Livesey's work and whether or not, Paul may not have existed. And he kind of laughed it off, right? In his comment, it was kind of a condescending remark. Of course, that becomes the screenshot that gets used by every fundamentalist on planet Earth to just dismiss or even clearly keep the sheeple away from possibly considering new ideas and expanding their mind on understanding how nuanced and complex the ancient world might be. Not to even say she's correct, okay? Because she could be wrong. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's really just a kind of a mocking stance. And I've heard it before. Let's quote Bart. And use him and weaponize him against anyone else as at least a skeptical standard. Here's an atheist academic who disagrees and therefore mock and laugh everyone off stage. And these are the very people I hate to be this way, but I feel like I have to reverse psychology of the situation and go, ladies and gentlemen, the people that are wanting to mock this believe virgins give birth, walk on water, float into clouds. Literally, he's going to come back on a cloud. Die and rot, like the whole night, like they're mocking you for using historical, secular, critical tools to evaluate the ancient world and maybe think she might be right, she might not be right, but you're supposed to swallow all of this, fantastic, what I would say fictitious legend as if it actually literally happened. I respect people who find and gloss this stuff and nourish and cherish the myth, and the stories have value and lessons and moral and ethics and inspiration. But like when you are bona fide, this happened and this is history, and you're trying to make that your champion argument, and then you mock people who are actually doing what we're doing, I draw the line. Sorry, I draw the line. So anyway, Bob, I'm sure there's more. I'd love to dive into this even more with you. I was thinking about how the money was returned from Rome to Marcion. I wonder if there's any overlap between that and all this stuff.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, so you cover this in the Colossal Apostle, I suspect. Okay, cool. All right, well, we'll just keep moving on then. And that took longer than usual because we had to really unravel Simon Magus. So, JC, again, what are the parallels between Ezekiel and Ishum and Era, especially regarding, and here we are with Hebrew again, Why do the Septuagint and Peshitta mistranslate sapphire, Ezekiel 9:2? I believe it's Ezekiel, but it might be Ezra, but I think it's Ezekiel. Parallels between Ezekiel and Ishum and...
I don't know who that is.
You don't know Ishum?
I don't know that name, nor do I know Hebrew, I'm ashamed to say.
Oh, JC, he's always got these kind of questions. So
he's smarter than me. I yield.
JC,
I wish I knew. I'm going to look up Ezekiel 9:7 though.
9:2.
Oh, 9:2.
Yeah. You want to look that up? Why do the Septuagint and Peshitta? But you'd have to know Hebrew to know exactly how it mistranslated, I suspect.
9:2. And lo, 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, every man with his weapon for slaughter in his hand. And with them was a man clothed in linen, with a writing case at his side. And they went in and stood beside the bronze altar.
I don't know, JC. Do you? No, I'm wondering if JC has a comment on that. If not, I'd actually love for them to email me. I'd be happy to send this to you, and maybe you can see what you find on it, Bob. When you have time.
Sounds interesting.
Cool. All right. Daniel Whitaker, thank you for becoming a member long ago. Member for 32 months of the YouTube channel. Hit that like button. Smash the like button, ladies and gentlemen, or Simon Magus might visit you on December 25th instead of Santa. JC back again says, when you finally left Christianity, did you also re-examine your belief in free will? If people don't have free will, can capitalism be valid? I don't know what.
Can anything be valid? I have this ongoing discussion with a good friend of mine who is just sold on the idea of thinking free will a fiction. And I think of... I believe there is a kind of determinism more like B.F. Skinner, though, not so much metaphysical, but that, or like Leibniz said, our behavior is predictable because we obey the law of our own being. Like if somebody says, hey, Bob, want to order a pizza? There's no question that I'm going to say yes. Pepperoni? There's no doubt of that, because that's my habit, my predilection, whatever, who knows why. But sure, I'm going to obey the law of my being, and I rejoice to do so. It is my free reaction, though it is determinable. You know what I'm going to do. So in a sense, yes, things are determined. How they got that way, environment, genetics, I don't know. But it's like everything it seems to me, if you believe in predestination, well, you know how capitalism, at least was it Max Weber who wrote Protestant Puritan Ethic and Capitalism, I used to know that title, where these guys decided that God has predestined us to be saved or damned, and since it's unconditional, there is no spiritual experiential evidence to prove even to the Christian that he or she is really a Christian and predestined to salvation. But maybe there's another way at this. Would God allow you to prosper if you weren't one of the elect? Well, let's try like hell to prosper and make a lot of money. That's so stupid, but he may be right. That may have motivated people to roll up their sleeves and get to work. But beyond that, if it's all predestined, it's like what happens in a novel. The characters within the novel are depicted as being able to make decisions and all that. But of course, the text is already in print. So it's like Maya in Hinduism and Buddhism. In fact, I think that's Calvinism and all that really implies Hinduism, that God is beyond space and time. Oh, in other words, he's Brahman. He's beyond this veil of illusion in which cause and effect and temporality seem to exist. So you're a believer in that? Well, welcome to Vedanta Hinduism. We will enjoy it.
I'm actually going to be talking to a friend. Let me make sure I properly pronounce Mukunda. I probably butchered this, but he's all over the Indian Vedic. We're going to be comparing it to Bible here soon on the stream. He first wants to interview me, but then I'll be joining him for an interview with MythVision, and so he can really help us to see some of the depths of Hinduism and have fun with that.
Neat.
But he also sees some of the darkness in it too. So that's the cool thing I like about it, is he's not an apologist. He's doing it from a perspective like I like, where I would just, fillet open the ancient traditions and really examine them, the good, the bad, the ugly, and enjoy learning from it all.
Well, if I may put in a self-serving plug, yet another, I got a new book available on Amazon called Houses of the Holy, a higher critical survey of world religions. And I deal with 12 of them, the usual ones and other ones that are much smaller.
I'm this
sure. Yep, son of a gun.
that
there
book? Listen, I had a rob. Did I tell you someone broke into my house the other day? I threw this at them and they ran and dissolved in midair. So they have to get a copy. They have to get if you want to keep people from robbing you, they dissolve. Anyway, seriously,
it's good for something.
You actually gave it to me. We went to Cracker Barrel in North Carolina when me and Ryan came to visit you and Carol, and rekindled this thing, this deep bond that we've had for many years, and we've worked through quite a lot of stuff, and I'm thankful for that with you, Bob. I'm glad I had many dreams. I'll just put it this way before we move to the next comment, is this: for the 647 people watching that are fans of Bob, that may not be fans of Bob, that may not know anything, listen, I had dreams about you passing away. I don't think people realize, maybe some do, how close we were and how close we are. And I had dreams that you passed away, and I woke up and it really sucked. I didn't want that. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, well, before the good man goes, I need to, make things right. Let's try to make things better. And here we are. And of course, a lot has happened off air. There's no reason to give fuel to the fire or anything like that to people online, because a lot of people want drama. They want to go down those paths. But again, thank you for joining me tonight. Get a book, if you will. Dr. Bob, love you, man. Okay, Mr. Monster, 33 months you have been with immortality. Now, we do have a once saved, always saved policy, but it can wear off. This is a strange version of it. It can wear off when you're not a member at all. There's no true salvation. So join the MythVision team. Thank you so much for being here. Just look at all the love emojis, showing love. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
They also sent a $2 super chat. Thank you so much. I'm happy to see you two on screen together. I am too. And anyway, I ask people to do their research. Please do your research. Don't take people's word for things in life. Really dig into stuff yourself. And oftentimes it helps to talk to people. I didn't know that till, you really get to learn that as you really get to give people a chance. When people say something, believe them. They tell you, try to believe what they're telling you. Okay. Kraken Ford in the house. So this is my friend, John F. White. If you haven't subscribed, he is into ancient mythology, covering, goodness gracious, the oldest myths in the world and how we can try and track them and trace them from cultures and civilizations and where the stories went and why and how geography influences each narrative. Love you, John. Thank you for being here. He says, hallelujah. It feels like 2023. Great to see you two being friends again.
Yep.
Thank you. Absolutely. We've been for a while now. We've been friendly for a while now, and we're definitely back. So I really appreciate it. Reinhard Schneider, thank you so much for the super chat. Great to see Dr. Bob back. We love you.
You too.
I love the haircut you got there, my friend. That's a sharp haircut in your emoji. Bob, you would need a magnifying glass. Your glasses probably wouldn't work for the hair. Anyway. You can probably see it now. Ichabod, ladies and gentlemen, this is Brady Goodwin. He was a Christian hip hop star, Bob. He was a big time Calvinist Christian hip hop star. He was the guy that we had that conversation with, you, me, Brady, and Durante, when we had our live stream talking together off air. We recorded together and stuff. This is Brady. And Brady says, "Love your heart, Derek. Dr. Price, good to hear your story."
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that, bro. Means a lot to me. It really does. Antonio Miranda, thank you so much for the super chat. Big YouTuber down in Brazil. Over 100,000 subscribers. Man, he's working a lot in Brazil to try and help people see the Bible, the mythology, the stories. And I love his community. I can't speak a lick of Portuguese. I might know one or two words, but I'll jump in there and they're just loving me, showering me with love. So hello, my brother. Good to see you together. How can we explain the absence of Galatians 1:19 in Epiphanius and Tertullian's response to Marcion?
Well, that it wasn't there in their copies. It was an anti-Marcionite interpolation, or these guys surely would have strengthened their argument. How could they not have referred to it? There's something similar. I don't know if there are any manuscripts that lack it, but also in Galatians, you ever notice how it says that in the fullness of time, God sent forth his son, born of a woman? What? You gotta waste ink saying that? I mean, who isn't? And well, of course, Marcion said that Christ simply beamed down from heaven already as an adult, presumably without a belly button, I guess. And it seems to me that is the only way to explain why somebody would put that in there. They're trying to say, well, some people don't think so, but he was born like everybody else. You're not going to say that unless it's in contention, and that's the only guy that said that. So anti-Marcion.
I've heard people argue the "born of a woman" phrase is just a common Jewish what would it be called? Off the top of my mind, I can't remember. Someone in the chat would probably be able to remember more. My mind's been everywhere else. But it's like a common Jewish phrase for just simply like, people born. He's born like anyone else, like normal people. And this was a common Jewish phrase, supposedly. Have you heard about that?
Well, there's something roughly similar in one of the Gospels. Of men born of women, none has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Nonetheless, even the lowest on the totem pole of the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. But again, that point there is a point to that. Of all mortal men, the greatest of the bunch is John the Baptist. So there's a point to that, but you're not going to say, hey, here's my friend Charlie. He was born of a woman.
Right. That it's an idiom, according to people and I do not know the argument off the top of my head. They're saying it's a typical Jewish idiom. But again, if your understanding of this is correct, it does. I mean, to me, it sounds strange. But then again, is this anachronistic for me? I don't know, because I don't know all the ins and outs of this material. But if it is
an idiom for. Unless you're trying to draw attention to a fact that would ordinarily not be in dispute. Right.
I need to go and check those sources for myself and kind of evaluate what you're describing here, because it's very interesting. Hey, Bob, welcome to the show. He was born of a woman. He has a mom. You would look at me like, mom. Right. But I don't know the idiom argument off the top of my head, so I don't want to straw man them. But yeah, thank you so much, Antonio. Love you, brother. Keep it up in Brazil, my friend. Domingo of Avils, does Dr. Price agree with David Fitzgerald, that all religion founders are myths? all religion founders. I don't know if it's every, but I think it's like he had a recent book where he's like pretty much arguing Buddha didn't exist. Like it's covering a lot of the major founders of religions. Moses, none of them existed. They're fictional.
Well, you need a pretty good piece of evidence to suggest it. And I think it's very likely that there was no Gautama Buddha, that there was no Jesus, that there was no Moses, and nobody really claims there was a Krishna, for instance. And but then again, in more recent times, where records survive, there certainly was a Jehovah's, the founder, Charles Taze Russell, and Joseph Smith, and so on, Mary Baker Eddy. It's not out of the question that there would have been a founder. It's just that you need some glaring thing, like it's really like agnosticism is required, because with the Buddha, for instance, there's nothing that even pretends to be a record of his teaching for some centuries after he supposedly lived. Well, that doesn't mean he didn't exist, but it certainly makes it a toss-up. It could be that it was so long afterward that they just didn't keep any relevant records of it, or that they did, like the Zoroastrian scriptures. It's just a total mess. We don't know what was written after and before what else. So you never really know. This is a case where the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence, right? Because there's just no way to know why there's no evidence either way. Like with Moses, however, it says something that the stuff that appears to be biographical information looks like it was just borrowed from the Genesis stories of Jacob. There are about 6 of them. And there's, other than that, there's nothing. I mean, Josephus has stuff, but where did he get it? It's not in any earlier source we have. So I would think there, probably not. But who knows with the others? Could be. I haven't seen Dave's book on that. It sounds like it would have to be interesting. I have to look at it.
Thank you, Domingo. I appreciate it, my friend. Sine, forgive me, analysis. Thank you for being a member for 10 months. I really appreciate you. Dr. Price, who is the ectroma of Corinthians 15? 1 Corinthians 15, I think.
Well, usually that it means an aborted or miscarried fetus. And it has theological meaning in Gnosticism, because the demiurge, the creator of the material world, is sort of a misbegotten offspring of Sophia, who wanted to continue begetting chains of ions from the pleroma, these divine emanations. But she was alone. Usually they had been emanated in pairs, but she was the last gasp of the emanation, but somehow managed to bear the demiurge. But since she just, as we would say, had only half the genetic material, it came out in deformed and disadvantaged, whatever you want to say, and they call that the ectroma. So the big issue with 1 Corinthians is there supposed to be some sort of a Gnostic reference here that Paul is like he's the apostles would implicitly be getting pictured as the legitimate emanations from the Godhead, but he, not being one of the 12 and yet an apostle of sorts, is outside of the major of the official group. It might mean that would be a sort of kind of a weird analogy, but it makes sense. So I have a hunch that's why he uses the term, which does mean an aborted fetus.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Being a member, keep your salvation, ladies and gentlemen. Keep working it. Thank you so much. JC, a bit again. Man, JC dropping bombs tonight. Why might the scribe of Psalm 49 have written Here we are with Hebrew, Bob. Knowing that pa'andu, I don't know how to pronounce this, chest also means middle. Is there a parable of Tiamat's half and Enuma Elish? Something like this. Psalm 49. So I'm wondering if there's some, yeah, like they're wondering if this has something. Yeah, Tiamat.
So, okay. I don't have the specific verse number, so let's see. Let's just read it and see what comes up. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of my persecutors surrounds me, men who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches? Truly, no man can ransom himself or give to God the price of his life. The Grim Reaper shows up, you're gonna, now it's like this night your life will be required of you. Can I pay you off? God, no, not gonna work, right? For the ransom of his life is costly and can never suffice, that he should continue to live on forever and never see the pit. Yet he shall see that even the wise die. The fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. The graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they named lands their own. Man cannot abide in his pomp. He is like the beasts that perish. This is the fate of those who have foolish confidence, the end of those who are pleased with their. Like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd. Straight to the grave they descend, and their form shall waste away. Sheol shall be their home. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Be not afraid when one becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases, for when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him, though while he lives, he counts himself happy. And though a man gets praised when he does well for himself, he will go to the generation of his fathers who will never more see the light. Man cannot abide in his pomp. He is like the beasts that perish.
So Tiamat, it sounds like, is there a parable? And I don't know the linguistics. So chest also means middle. Is there a parable? And then Tiamat's half in Enuma Elish. And then he dropped another one here, I think is dealing with this. Akkadian lexical associations, Bantu, rib cage, T-rib, TT, Ba'am, Ta'a, I'm not even sure. JC, write it in simple form right now because you've dropped some supers here. I'm literally looking at the chat. Explain what you're asking in dum-dum terms without getting into linguistics for me, because I don't know how to track this.
Also, what verse?
Yeah, what verse in 49? And also, what are you asking about pertaining to Tiamat and the parable? Like, what is it? What do you make it in dum-dum terms for me? Because I'm dum-dum when it comes to this. The final verse, he said. And what are you asking specifically? Like, what is the basic question of what you're asking? Is there a parable that relates to? Oh, he is like the beast behemoth, JC's saying.
Well, I think it's like, it sounds to me like it's just like Ecclesiastes. Human beings and animals share the same fate. They go into the ground and their breath returns to God who gave it in the first place. I mean, it seems to me it would make sense if it's a parallel to that. And the generation of his fathers who will never see the light. Sheol is the shadowy nether world.
Yeah, I don't know. Huh.
Yeah, okay, I'd like to know more about this.
Yeah, if you have some stuff you can send me, JC, get it to Bob, have him check it out,
Yeah.
and give his thoughts.
Oh yeah, fascinating.
JC also super chatted again and says, how does that relate to ribs? Maybe I should have kept reading the next super chat. How does that relate to ribs, shadows, and mirrors? Masulu, image. These are related to the parables and the proverbs of Jesus, who is like God. I don't know. I don't know. Do you know?
I don't know what to make of that. Who is like God?
Please email me. Email me and I'll get it to Bob. Or you can email Bob, you know.
Intriguing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, JC. Mr. Warlight, what might be the origin of the proto-orthodoxy, and how did this ecclesiastical community takes form in the first centuries? Thanks for the super chat.
I personally do not care for the term proto-orthodoxy because it seems to me to be it seems to be skirting the issue of whether early Christianity is a combination of different ingredients. And its proto-orthodoxy seems to me to imply something pretty much like a prototype of developed Catholic orthodoxy and so on, but with not everything worked out, like that they wouldn't have had a Nicene Christology yet. Because any church history person knows that it took centuries to fine tune the whole thing, but people were saying, yeah, Jesus was the Son of God. So I tend to think Burton Mack was right. I asked him once, aren't you saying that there were various Jesus movements and Christ cults that were very different, but somehow came together eventually, perhaps because of attrition? If they were, like, we know pretty much that something like that happened with a couple of Melchizedek sects that were still alive in St. Augustine's time, because in the Nag Hammadi texts, there is one called Melchizedek, and it appears to be Gnostic in some passages and non-Gnostic in others, which I think implies that you had two Melchizedek groups, one Gnostic, one not, but that as they began to shrink membership-wise, they said, well, there are these people over here that, we have something in common with. Maybe we could just join together with them. When I became a pastor, it was of a shrinking congregation that was a fusion of a Southern Baptist and an American Baptist congregation that were both dying out. And this never works, by the way. Church demographics show that whenever you have a desperation fusion, within a year, the whole combined membership will have shrunk to that of the smaller fusing congregation. And so that probably happened here with the Melchizedekians, and that's why there aren't any anymore. But I'm thinking that the picture I get of the Melchizedek union probably is what Burton Mack was thinking happened with the Christ cults and the Jesus movements. You hear Paul speak of another Jesus. That could mean another Christology, but it might mean that there were actually different saints or figureheads, both named Jesus, common name, and that eventually they got together. Who knows? But I think that what we have is a syncretistic thing to begin with. And what were the basic elements of it? Judging by these surviving cardinal elements of early Christianity that don't seem to me naturally to fit together, it's more artificial. You probably had influence from the Hellenistic hero cults, because the crucifixion narratives really make the most sense to me as like these ancient novels where the hero is condemned to the cross, but manages, as Superstar says, to escape in the final reel. And also the mystery religions, which means the initiation religions. There were plenty of those: Osiris, Mithras, Attis, and so on, with the sacred meal and the sacred initiation rites. And Gnosticism, with the idea that Jesus on earth was some kind of a heavenly visitant. And so I think that those are the three basic elements that came together to form, if you want to call it, a proto-orthodoxy. But I don't think there was just a simplified Catholicism to begin with.
Right. It's an interesting thing to think about how they would have fused, like you said, and you almost need to heuristically compare it to other cults to see how they formed and how they become what they are. Look at Mormonism, right? Started with Joseph Smith, and it was supposed to go to his son, and then it ends up going to another guy, and then there's splinter sects, and now there's these bubbles and bubble, but there's the main one that gets most of the attention. You have all these offshoots. The question then becomes, though, is there really just one at the start? And I like M. David Litwa's book pertaining to this idea, where he actually, instead of calling lost Christianities, he's in a way in his book, the title is critiquing Bart Ehrman, because Bart Ehrman called it lost Christianities. He's like, no, found Christianities. So he called them found Christianities. And I loved how he points out how wild west it really was. There was so much diversity and interesting flavors of spirituality and mythos and legend, like just awesome, cool stuff, like things that the best way I put it is this: the differences between early groups or different believers at that period, in some cases, is more distant than Catholicism is from Mormons. Like some of their teachings were so different that, it's like, whoa, what? So someone needed to hone in their constituency politically and get everyone under a single umbrella in order for this thing to, I think, really thrive. And we see that happening. So thank you, Mr. Warlight. History Valley, we have none other than Jacob Berman in the house. Thank you for the 20, Jacob. By the way, I hear he's got something coming in a week or so. By the way, next weekend is my birthday, and I'll be 21 years old, Bob. I'm just kidding. I was waiting for you to be like, huh? Come on, man. Let me have it. Let me just have it, Bob. No, my son's 18 now, so I was 3 when I begot him. And let me tell you, of men born of women, I'm just kidding. He says, good to see you back in action, Bob. The vast majority of scholars think Paul's letters are ignorant of the Gospels or any gospel like them. What do you think?
That looks more likely to me, but I know David Oliver Smith has written at least one book where he tries to demonstrate that parallel ideas and sometimes parallel language make it look like the Gospels are borrowing from Paul. And I know, though I'm less familiar with the arguments, that the late Richard Purvo believed that. Oh, no, wait a minute. Purvo was talking about Acts using the epistles. Yeah, yes. I'm sorry. Right. But Smith is the one that says the Gospels seem to be based on the epistles. I don't find, and some stuff is striking, but I can't quite buy it yet.
What are your, okay, then to hone in, because he dropped a massive one. The idea that Paul, when he talks about his gospel, I've heard a lot of people go, well, he just means his Christ crucified message. But there have been some that postulate, well, no, he had a gospel. He had an actual, whoever the author is that's writing this as this character, Paul, whether you think it's fictitious or historical, had a actual gospel. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm just beginning to take that seriously. Marcus Vincent, I believe, says that.
Okay, that's where I heard it.
He's picturing Paul saying it, of course, but it's really he himself who created the Pauline gospel, and could have created Paul, who knows? But I still go with the Simon Magus theory. But it's possible. But I think it really fits best if you say that this is Marcion talking as Paul.
Thank you so much. Mr. Warlight, what is a gospel verse with a Gnostic connection?
Well, I would say the parable of the sower certainly sounds Gnostic. There are different types of listeners who, because of the way they are, like the stony ground, the thorny ground, the susceptibility to birds eating the seeds, there's no way they're going to wind up accepting the gospel. It's the good soil that is receptive. That sounds like a kind of Gnostic predetermination, because the good soil is the good soul, actually. You are the one that can hear this. Is, yes, that's what I've been missing, like Neo in the Matrix. Morpheus says, you know there's something you're missing. I can tell you what it is if you're willing to find out. I mean, that's explicitly based on Gnosticism, but there's that. And then there is in the Good Shepherd monologue in John, you want to know why you can't hear my voice? It's because you don't belong to my flock. Well, Bultmann pointed out, wouldn't you expect him to say, the reason you're not in my flock is you're not listening to my voice?
Right.
But no, it sounds like it's predestination. But then Bultmann brilliantly says, this is a kind of rhetorical trick. Really, what you're doing, you are the one who decides whether you can hear his voice or not. Why is Jesus telling the parable of the soils? So you can say, oh my God, I don't want to be the one with the thorns and all that. I don't want to forfeit it. Yeah, that's right. You could be any one of these, but who decides? It's you.
It's so this reminds me that Thomas, breaking the fourth wall, where he's like, but blessed are you.
Yep.
Who don't see yet still believe. Mm-hmm. It's like a free will-ish predestination. Like, hey, if you were predestined, exactly. And that's a brilliant way to. It's funny how theologians, specifically devout theologians who really, really believe this stuff and like are fundamentalists, only can see that like philosophical determinism and not realize the rhetorical, the brilliant pen of the person that is writing this, that is getting you hooked in. I think that's brilliant. They're usually looking at it in like divine ways, whereas you and me would look at it and go, now, why is he saying that? It's getting you to think. It's getting you to go, now, will you believe today? Will you be proving yourself to be the one that was chosen? You know what I mean? Like, so it's a free will.
I don't know whether you are. Only you can say.
Right.
Bultmann was a theologian as well as a brilliant New Testament scholar. And William Barclay, the Bible translator, said that Bultmann was the most evangelical preacher he had ever heard. And he didn't believe in literal miracles and all that stuff. But I was in the thick of reading Bultmann's massive commentary on the Gospel of John when an old school friend of mine, who was the interim pastor of the church where I was the next in line and became pastor, I knew her pretty well. She was killed in a stupid traffic accident. And I was at the church where her funeral was going to be. And I had all these Johannine monologues floating around in my head from reading this great book. And I was right at the edge of one of the pews, and the procession with her coffin came down right beside me toward the front. And somehow, I can't say how, but the depth of the experience of this was so augmented by my mind dwelling in the Gospel of John as Bultmann expounded it. It was a spiritual experience. It's not just some dry academic thing. He really brings it to life.
Right. Yeah,
Mm.
his was the commentary that I went to. He's one of the few that really nailed down the whole water into wine thing, and he says it comes from heathen legend, Dionysus, and he like bluntly admitted, I found no Jewish antecedents for this. It's clearly coming from a Dionysian legend. And I mean, I found that, and of course, there's other scholars who've capitalized on that, and really brought that forward, like Dennis MacDonald's The Dionysian Gospel and all that. But yeah, that's interesting. JC,
does
thank you.
that negate the power of it? Because it was
No.
shared in common with some other ancient ritual, or that the body and blood may have originated with Osiris and all? No,
Right.
It adds extra depth to the thing.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful to find out how connected all the stories are. And I also think it's a way to free yourself from the bondage of a single narrative and assuming this one literally happened.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more joy and freedom to explore. Like whatever path you want to take. It reminds me of like one of my favorite video games where at the beginning there's like the creators of the game literally create the game so that you can take 100 different paths. And it's not like you have to go down one path. There's a lot of fun, and you can replay the game and go down different ones and have different experiences, and people play things. I like those kinds of depth games, right? Well, the same goes for this. I like to explore this idea. Let's hear what Nina has to say about Paul. Oh, let's go check out the Simon Magus thing. Let's check out what Osiris and Dionysus have in common. Where did Yahweh come from? Like that is so freeing instead of, what did you say, Pastor? Okay, I'll say exactly what you said. Anyway. JC, again, thank you for the super chat. Saul, a choice young man and a goodly. And there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. 1 Samuel 9:2. Let me see what.
And yet Saul means little.
No, Paul. Doesn't Paul mean little?
Yeah, both do.
Saul and Paul means little.
That's what I'm told. Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know Saul meant little. I knew that someone mentioned Paul meant little. That's interesting. So here he is, the most massive little guy who walked among his people. Oh.
Well, this is part of the Deuteronomic theology that they're already putting Saul down because he didn't found a dynasty. David did. And so they're making Saul look like a bum as quickly as they can. So he's tall and towering, but that means nothing because it's the arm of flesh will fail you. You dare not trust your own. It's like David, I can't wear this armor. Let me just shoot the guy in the head with a rock. That ought to do it. It really is brains over brawn, but it's supposed to be a lesson of how it's not human power, it's divine wisdom that prevails. Don't say my hand has gotten me this.
So just so we are understanding, JC's got an interesting, this is kind of making more sense, I think, of what he's trying to say. Okay, so we just heard his super chat right now. I'm trying to keep up with the contemporary because, JC's wicked smart on this and thinking through this, and I want to make sure we get it. He's saying Saul was high, but was made Paul. So now we're thinking of Acts, right? We're in Acts. So we're thinking of the quote. Remember, there is mimesis here. Clearly, this story, I'm convinced by Michael Koshinosh's argument, Better Call Paul Saul, that article he wrote proving that it's a fictitious character. Title. Yeah, have you read that?
No, I've heard of it, and I know the TV series Better Call Saul. I love that.
I love that too. Better Call Paul Saul is the name, and he clearly was inspired by the show. In this, he goes through the history of the scholarship about the name Saul and Paul, mainly Paul, and how scholars went, well, he had two names, and like they want to historicize it, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, no. King Saul, think King Saul. So now we're thinking King Saul with JC here. His super chat here is talking about Saul, a choice young man and a goodly. There was not among the children of Israel a goodlier man than he. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher. So he's up, right? He's tall. Now we're down here in JC says Saul was high, and the high things are to be brought low.
Oh.
As in Ishum and Era. So the poem of Era, is this the poem of Era, the Akkadian story that you're talking about? I'm trying to wrap my head around because it's been a while since I've read it. But anyway, that's interesting is Old Testament. Not that Acts would have any clue about the poem of Era necessarily, but I could see some play on in the scriptures. You talk about rewrite, right? We were talking about earlier in your story. If Acts is rewriting scripture in a fun way, you could see something going on here. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes, the poem of Era, he said. And now it's starting to I'm not told you I'm a dum-dum now. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around here. Forgive me. What are your thoughts there, Bob? You think it's pretty interesting? That
makes sense. I mean, that's the mighty shall be brought low, like in the Magnificat and all that. That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, it's very interesting. It's fun to see how they're playing with this material like that. If that's correct, I think you're onto something here, because I definitely think we're thinking of King David when he snipped off the corner piece of Saul's clothing and he screams, "Saul, Saul, why are you pursuing me?"
Mm-hmm.
Literally, King David already said this somewhere in Samuel or something to King Saul. Why are you pursuing me? And the Septuagint the Greek is very similar to what's in Acts about Jesus, the son of David, saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And so this was written by Michael Koshinosh, and in that article, but it might be playing more than just that direct thing. It might be playing on the whole theme that Saul was a big person who needed to be brought low, therefore his name being Paul. I don't know. So I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, yeah, and the fact that he is the Deuteronomic writer already has it in view that he's going to be replaced as the glorious king of Israel by a kid who couldn't fit into Saul's armor. So presumably David couldn't have been that. Is more like Napoleon, shorter but powerful. And so it's like Saul may look like Mr. Muscles and all that, but that's not what God's looking for. He wants somebody that will obey him and so on. And David was the apple of his eye and all that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Steve Watson, thank you so much for the super chat. I think Bob's camera is focusing more on his figures and clock in the back. When he is still, the camera seems to focus on him better.
Huh.
That's an interesting... I think the internet's still glitchy, but because you didn't have this problem on Gnostic Informant yesterday. So I could see you better on my phone. So I don't know. I don't know. But I appreciate the observation, because I think you're right. When you do move, the very little internet you do have that's keeping you attached to us here, it does get like blurry when it's trying to work itself to focus you. But I think it's the internet. I really do think it's more the internet, but I think it doesn't help. The focus doesn't help. So JC again says the Greek in the Septuagint, not the English translation of Ezekiel 9:2. The Greek translate the SPR Hebrew root to sapphire. Classical Syriac also translates it to sapphire. The classical Syriac is, I would imagine, sapila. I'm not sure how to pronounce that properly. And then there's the Hebrew.
Yeah, it must be sapphire. Yeah, like Ananias and Sapphira.
Interesting. Uh-oh. JC, thank you. Please email me, because I would love to have Bob chew on that when he has time.
Yeah.
Aberslam, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but thank you for the super chat. So happy to see Dr. Bob in the house. Love you.
Thank you.
Ross K. Nichols TV, my buddy Ross. He says, "Let's go to Israel, Derek. You owe me a tea." Oh, God. I got to tell the story. So we were at the Dead Sea 2 years ago on a tour with Dr. James Tabor. And Ryan said, hey, I can't tell you, the experience was amazing. It was a blast. We're floating on water. Like you can't swim down, and don't open your eyes. You'll be in trouble if you do in the water. Ryan's like, give me some of this sea salt. It'll be good for my skin, because when you get in it, it's so healthy. You can tell. Well, I had to find a bottle to put the salt in. And I saw someone had a, not quite like this. There was like a lot less fluid in it, but there's a bottle, and I poured out this little bit of tea that was in this bottle, right? And I fill it up with sand, or it's like all the salt and a little bit of sand. And I go back, and Ross is like, hey, where's my tea? And I was like, you mean the empty bottle? And he's like, no, I had some tea left in there. So I have committed the unforgivable sin with Ross. And by the way, he's one of the most fun tour guys I've ever been on tour with. It's so much fun. But so we joke around, and he'll be live, and I'll like super chat. I'm like, listen, here's $5. Forgive me, damn it. Forgive me. And he'll be like, I can't. Like we have a little inside joke. But right now, might be price-wise the best time to make a trip like that happen, Ross. I'll reach out to you. Maybe we can make something like that happen, because I really want to go see some of these sites on a scholarly tour and research and go see the areas and stuff. But I also want to make sure that if we do, we're in guaranteed safe locations and we can see some of the historical material. Thank you, Ross. Gamma, thank you for the super chat. What are the strongest arguments against, I like this thinking, against the Dutch radicals' ideas, and who's made them?
I'm not sure. It seems to me that the faith in the tradition gets buttressed by arguments of stylistic consistency, though I'm not sure how to judge that. I'm not sure there is such consistency style-wise. People say, well, there's a definite personality here, but I don't think that's too hard to concoct. I mean, whoever wrote them had a personality. Might not have been Paul, though. For instance, if you compare 3rd Corinthians, an early apocryphal work, it sounds a lot like Paul and the other ones to me. I'm sure there are differences, but there are differences in within the other ones. Like, it's interesting that if you compare Luke and Acts, they're supposed to be by the same author, but there are a number of cases where in Acts, a synonym is regularly used for an oft occurring word in the gospel. Why is it consistently different in this second work? Similarly, in the Western text of Acts, it's like 20% longer than the Alexandrian, etc., mainly because of little bitty phrases and words added all over the place.
Yeah.
There's no extra stories or anything. But people that know better than I do say, well, the style of the longer passages appears to be the same. So some say maybe this is a longer second edition from the same hand, which is not unlikely. And Josephus kept updating and lengthening his works, but I'm not so sure how much that proves. And again, there are what seem to me gross inconsistencies between one epistle and another by the same person, supposedly, or in within a single epistle, like in 1 Corinthians, which bounces all over the place, like a badminton tennis match across the net. Women can prophesy? No, they can't. You can be financially supported by your congregation. Oh, but that'd be a bad idea. You can't eat meat offered to idols, but if you do, you might go to hell. Like, what is this? It sounds to me like a compilation. And so I don't know how you get past that except by wild rationalization. It's very much like how in the Quran, at least a quarter of it, I'm told, doesn't make any evident sense in Arabic. So what the early ulema did, their scholars, was to create a kind of theological grammar to impose on the Arabic text that would come up with weird little rules that would enable them to harmonize things or redefine them. But it was retrofitted to make sense of the text, and that's kind of what commentary does in the epistles, trying to iron it out by supplying missing bricks in the wall, and you need a lot of those bricks to do it. So I'm not sure what a good argument is. It's just that people hesitate to question the tradition, and of course that's a healthy instinct. You don't want to just toss it out on the possibility that it's not as we thought, but you really need to be open to the possibility that things are different. And I think usually they don't require any arguments. It's just inertia.
Interesting. Okay. I hope that gave you something, Gamma. I really appreciate it. AB, thanks for the super chat. Dr. Bob, have you ever considered the construct state interpretation of Genesis 1:1 versus the traditional interpretation? In the beginning, God created versus in the beginning of God creating.
Yeah, I think it's very likely that it means when God began to create the earth, it was a big mess. It was without form and void, so that creation is ordering chaos into cosmos, because virtually all ancient Middle Eastern cosmogonies do explicitly put it that way, though I believe there is one version in Egypt where the creator god Ptah does create where there was nothing. And that finally appears in the Bible in one of the books of the Maccabees, I forget which, and in Hebrews, where it says that the things that are didn't come from the things that appear or something, but so that there was no material precedent or source for it. But I think that seems to be creation ex nihilo. But I think the notion of that notion is not necessarily in Genesis 1.
Thank you, AB. Appreciate the super. Angry Amalekite Infant, thank you for the super chat. I probably disagree with Dr. Bob 100% politically. I don't mind taking this question because I think it's relevant here. But his scholarship, superlative critical thinking, and encyclopedic knowledge are highly valued. Thank you. I know Bob doesn't care.
That's what we're about. I don't care what you or anybody else thinks politically. I almost don't even care what I think politically. I'm not wearing that hat. I say live and let live. I'm eager to hear what people who disagree with me think. I can learn something that way. So I don't go for this feuding strife over politics. To hell with that.
Yeah. Thank you for the super chat. Esoteric philosopher, Dr. Bob, you won't regret reading Dr. Bernardo Kastrup's books, Between Atheism and Theism, Science and Philosophy Background. Interesting.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Bernardo Kastrup. By the way, I know this who this is. I think he's an idealist philosopher to some degree. So I could get you an email if you're interested in your.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually interviewed him on my channel before. So yeah, wicked smart guy. JC, we covered that one. Robert Hibernian, forgive me if I butchered that. Dr. Price, what do you make of the idea that Judaism didn't really exist, at least not in any widespread way, until roughly 200 BCE?
Well, I already kind of thought that based on reading a book called The Three Temples. What's her name? I can never remember it. Where she doesn't make that explicit, but describes the transformation wrought by the so-called Deuteronomic reform in terms of open-ended belief in revelation and stuff, esoteric stuff on the one hand, and strict puritanical scripture quoting. And she describes it in terms that seem to me to fit so well the factors that split the Essenes from the Pharisees in the post-Hasmonean period. And I thought, I bet you that's the Sitzum Laban for the so-called Deuteronomic reform. And then I read Jonathan Adler's book about the origin of Judaism, and son of a gun, he deals with a whole different realm of evidence, archaeology and so on, and shows that there's like no references to the cardinal laws and rituals or even monotheism in the remains of Judaism before the Hasmoneans. He even shows, like, from, I guess, Elephantine in the temple. I mean, there was an outlying temple, probably more than one, and they worshipped several gods, Yahweh, Ahura Mazda, for Pete's sake, and various other ones. And Adler's book, I said, okay, that fits exactly. Plus, Russell Mirkin late dates the Pentateuch to the time of Ptolemy Philadelphus, who supposedly rallied all the Jewish savants to translate the Hebrew Pentateuch into Greek, giving us the Septuagint. But he says, no, he thinks what really happened was he got different Jewish factions to compile their law codes and traditions, resulting in the very first Pentateuch. And they did a Greek and a Hebrew version at the same time. But I think his argument for placing it in the second, what would that be, the third century BCE.
Yeah.
I think it's a century too early. I think his argument is not convincing there. So I see these three lines of evidence converging to give a big yes to Niels Peter Limke's book. His article was the Pentateuch, a Hellenistic work. And I think it's second century BCE. Of course, it uses older traditions, probably undatable. But yeah, I think that Judaism, as stipulated in the Pentateuch, is no older than the second century, the Hasmonean period, and that they compiled it as an education manual for all the little Semitic groups they forced into the Hasmonean kingdom. And they started synagogues as education centers. Okay, now this is going to be our religion. You better bone up on it. And it makes so much sense to me. I am completely convinced.
Thank you so much, Bob. Again, Aberslam, thank you for the super chat. Judas's portrayal as evil leads to problems with predestination and damnation outside of the Gospel of Judas. Is there anything dealing with this?
Well, it does imply in the Last Supper, in one of them, the Son of Man goes as it is written of him or for him. He's got to follow the script. But woe unto that man by whom he goes. So it's anticipating. They just say, well, if the poor bastard couldn't help it, he was predestined, why are you blaming him? Sorry, but that both are true. It's like in Joseph, he says to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So there may be divine and human purposes, like why did the novelist make a character betray another character? Well, he did it to juice up the narrative, but the betrayer has an intra-diegetic, an intra-plot reason for it. And there are these two levels, which is why I think this devolves into Hinduism, that we are in a kind of fictive world of Maya compared to the creator. So the religions are much closer than people are willing to admit.
Thank you, Bob. Couple more here, and then we'll wrap it up for a nice Saturday night. I think I'm gonna go cuddle and watch a great show. I'll tell you, I'll sleep like a baby tonight. It really this meant a lot to me, Bob. This meant a lot to me.
Me too. Great fun.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm almost more excited to impress Carol than I am you. That's how much I love Carol so much.
Yeah, she's so great.
Oh my gosh, she's a badass. Honestly, she is she's awesome. Dragons in Genesis podcast. Be sure to subscribe to all of these people. Jason, by the way, Jason came to your house. Remember Pear Pie?
Oh, back in the day? Can't forget that.
Pear Pie. I'll never forget it. And I have some recordings, by the way, with you and Bob, just giving you a heads up, like 9 of them, I think.
Wow.
That have never been released. Listen, Bob, I worked so hard in 2022 and 2023, and I came to your house so often. I'm not exaggerating when I say I think I have about 150 videos on my Patreon right now of you and me and you and Jason. And I have maybe 200, but I think probably 100, 150 recordings that we've done over the years that have never been released. So I've got some with you and Jason here. And we'll slowly leak those out and start getting people to be able to look at some of the past. But maybe we'll have some future ones too, some higher quality ones. I'm reading a book called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul, which lays out a case for the synoptics using Paul's letters. Can Dr. Bob
David Oliver Smith, my pal.
Got it. Yeah,
I've read that book. Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about, where I find myself not quite convinced, but it's well worth considering, and I still have to make up my mind ultimately on it.
Yeah, which means Bob is skeptical. Bob's a skeptic. It's all good.
Of course.
Absolutely. Look, you should be if you're going to test stuff. Stacy, thank you for the super chat, Stacy. Eden's trees, do you think literal or metaphorical?
I think they're understood to be literal in terms of this being a fictive narrative, because it is partly because of the logic of it, that God does not want them to eat of the one tree that will enable them to procreate, the tree of carnal knowledge, basically. And it's okay if they eat of the tree of life that will give them immortality, which is how God himself has it. That's certainly implied. It's a garden for God and his divine colleagues. And it's all right if the gardener takes a bite now and then, but the plan was he only wanted one guy as the caretaker. He'd never die, so he didn't need but one. And so I think you're supposed to understand it that way. And the whole thing is so parallel to the Gilgamesh epic, where you have the story of the creation of a man from the ground as Enkidu, and it's through carnal knowledge that he gains wisdom, just like Adam and Eve. And I think in both cases you're to believe that this sort of fairy tale stuff happened, and this was their explanation, just like the Pandora story. I don't think that was some kind of concrete narrative that somehow expresses some vague idea. I mean, if that symbolizes the origin of sin or suffering, how? I mean, it must be an ideological myth. How did this come about? Maybe one day this strange thing happened. Or the rainbow. Their ingenuity was expressed not in science because they didn't have the instruments yet, but they used their brain to say, what the heck is this thing that appears as the rain is stopping? Well, it must be the war bow of God, of Yahweh, the storm god. And he's saying, okay, my war against the humans is over. I'm hanging my bow, and every time it rains, the bow will appear and remind me, "Hey, Yahweh, stop watching the football game and turn the faucet off." I think that certainly that's what they thought happened, and they weren't stupid. I always like to defend the ancients. It was their imaginative reason that made them come up with that. What else could they have thought?
You can see how it makes sense to them. The other interesting parallels that I found really cool, connecting the whole Eden narrative right there with the tree and all, of course, is like you said, Enkidu he's made and he lives in the forest, right? In the garden-like state, with animals, just like Adam. And what I find interesting about that is Shamhat, the prostitute that finally comes, Gilgamesh in his wisdom says, listen, you go and you show your jewels, show your bodily gifts that the gods have given you to him, and he's going to come to you like bees on honey. And sure enough, Enkidu does, and he ends up humanizing through the process of sexual orientation, tries to go back to the woods where, of course, Humbaba, dwelled and stuff.
Which may be a textual variant for hubba hubba. Just kidding.
Yeah, and he tries to go back. Yeah, I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
But yeah. No, you're good. You're good. It's that he tries to go back. The animals are like, no, you've become a human now. Like you're fully, and of course, Adam finds his helpmeet and Eve, of course. But anyway, I think there's so much fun in exploring this and giving the ancients a little bit of credit, even though there's some ideas that we can look at and we know better now. We know better.
The thing with one thing in the Gilgamesh scene, the prostitute says after Enkidu saying, "What the heck? Where'd everybody go? Is it my breath? What?" And she then says, "Behold, Enkidu, you are become wise like a god." That's just what the snake says.
Exactly. And then later, there's a serpent that steals the plant, right, from Gilgamesh.
Come on.
Oh my gosh, you're making me speak in tongues, Bob. I mean,
fascinating. Oh, I love this stuff.
I love it too. Mr. Warlight, thank you again for the super chat. Dr. Price, you are the most famous critic of Paul's authorship. However, if you must pick, the way I read that, if you must pick, what epistle is closest to having a shred of authenticity?
You mean actually being by Paul, Saul of Tarsus?
Yeah, like, or at least, yeah, I would say that's probably the best way to put it. Of Paul's authorship. Which one, if you were to grant, suppose there was a guy, you kind of have to presuppose it because, for the sake of argument.
I would say 2 Corinthians. That is kind of a mess too. It seems to be a compilation of at least 3 letter fragments, but nonetheless, that's sort of a different issue. It could have written all of them, but that does seem to, somebody has taken a lot of trouble to describe hardships and so forth that led to recent conditions and all that. And to me, that sounds the most like somebody actually, let me catch you up to date on what I'm suffering and why I haven't been there as I said I would. That can be fake too. I mean, a literary creation, but if so, it's a darn good one. And that would have, I think, the best claim to be an authentic Pauline letter.
Thank you. Good answer. JC, see also Ezekiel 21:26. Thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem and take off the crown. This shall not be the same. Exalt him that is low and abase him that is high. So this is the same JC from earlier about the high and the low with King Saul and the poem of Era, E-R-R-A. But thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem. Here we are with a kingly figure again. So you have a Jesus king, you have a King Saul, right? You have all these different king figures, high and low.
Yeah, starting with verse 18, the word of Yahweh came to me again, Son of man, mark 2 ways for the sword of the king of Babylon to come. Both of them shall come forth from the same land, and make a signpost. Make it at the head of the way to a city. Mark a way for the sword to come to Rabbah of the Ammonites, and to Judah, and to Jerusalem the fortified. For the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the way, at the head of the 2 ways, to use divination. He shakes the arrows, he consults the teraphim, he looks at the liver. What's it called? Horoscopy or something?
I don't know.
Into his right hand comes the lot for Jerusalem, to open the mouth with a cry, to lift up the voice with shouting, to set battering rams against the gates, to cast up mounds, to build siege towers. But to them it will seem like a false divination. They have sworn solemn oaths, but he brings their guilt to remembrance, that they may be captured. Therefore, thus says the Lord Yahweh, because you have made your guilt to be remembered, and that your transgressions are uncovered, so that in all your doings your sins appear, because you have come to remembrance, you shall be taken in them. And the Greek says, with the hand. And you, O unhallowed wicked one, Prince of Israel, whose day has come, the time of your final punishment. Thus says the Lord Yahweh, remove the turban and take off the crown. Things shall not remain as they are. Exalt that which is low, and abase that which is high. A ruin, ruin, ruin I will make it. There shall not even be a trace of it until he comes whose right it is, and to him I will give it.
Yeah. So instead of a turban, it says diadem here in this English here. But either way, you could see like the head covering. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if it plays any role with the whole, later Christians searching little puzzle pieces in scripture to find high and low philosophically. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't really know what
sort of like saying, he who exalts himself will be humbled, he who humbles himself will be exalted.
It seems to sound kind of like it could play into that. You could see someone using it for that, the motif of humbling people who are exalted. But I can't imagine that that's, original to Bible, right? I imagine it's common wisdom to see, what goes up must come down kind of stuff, Yep. But yeah, I could see it being played into Saul Paul later too. Steve Watson, thank you for the super chat, my friend. Let me see. Is Rachel Elior the
Rachel
author?
Elior, she's the one that wrote the 3 temples. Thank you.
The 3
on
temples.
The Emergence of Jewish Mysticism. Great book.
Really?
Thank you. I appreciate you mentioning that.
Thank you, Steve Watson. I appreciate it. Heng Fashi, good to see you here, my friend. Old Testament. Do you think REH flirted with atheism when Conan says, I have known many gods. He who denies them is as blind as he who trusts them too deeply. I seek not beyond death. Also, Boris or Frazetta.
Oh, I much prefer... Boris Vallejo did great Conan covers, but to me, Frank Frazetta is even better. He has the style of like an older Renaissance painter, and yet it is fantastic stuff brought to real life as if you're actually seeing it. And I just think he had a great magical artistic gift. In fact, that's what started me reading Robert E. Howard and the Conan stories when I saw a copy of Conan the Warrior, one of the Lancer paperbacks at a stationery store. And that changed the whole direction of my life. I was just a middling, apathetic reader before that. This was in junior high, I think, when I read this. And I always like to say how my English teacher in the 8th grade, I guess it was, gave us all index cards to write down the title and author of any book we read. And of course, we had to read 6 or 7, like The Old Man, The Sea, The Light in the Forest, all these incredibly boring things. And so I wrote those down. But just at this time, I discovered Robert E. Howard and Conan and the whole world of this stuff, Doc Savage, Conan, Tolkien, etc. And I was reading hundreds of books. And so I kept asking the teacher, can I have another index card and another one and another one? I really made the other kids look like a bunch of bums. But I got to know L. Sprague de Camp. Howard was dead for decades by then, but de Camp was responsible for the Lancer reprints of Howard's work. And I came to know him years later. And I told him, you changed my life by issuing those books. I don't know what what path I would have taken, but you hooked me with those, and it's never changed.
It makes me think your keen observations, the way you think, you almost want to, I don't want to dwell on this too long, but it's like your reading and learning about fiction has helped you catch much of the fiction you read in the ancient texts. Would you agree with that? Oh
yeah. Also, my lifelong devotion to superhero comics. And to ancient mythologies, the Trojan War, Hercules, all that stuff, and horror and fantasy fiction. To me, this all interpenetrates with the Bible and theology, because these other things are the modern mythology. And don't get me started on how superhero movies are filled with political warnings of the dangers of what may happen with artificial intelligence and corruption of intelligence agencies. It's as if they were like giving a wink to the reader, stay tuned, this is coming your way. But just one last thing, and I'll shut up about this, but when Carol was teaching first graders in the local school right down the block from us, she had me come in to talk about superheroes. And these kids were very young, and I felt a little intimidated because I'd never taught kids that age. I taught graduate students, college students. But immediately it was apparent that there was no difference in the teaching experience, that given something they were interested in, they were enthused about learning more about it and sharing opinions. And it was like the grad students I had. I was stunned. And that tells me a lot about education and why it's generally failing. Like Carol found that when she occasionally would read a fairy tale or an ancient myth done for kids, the kids had never heard of this stuff. Nobody ever shared it with them. Wasn't in the curriculum. They didn't get it home. Oh, more. What a terrible educational mess we have in this country. And it would be easy to correct it.
Thank you so much, Hangfa and Bob. I appreciate your answering my question there. On Robertson, thank you so much. I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you for the super chat. How are you doing live interviews and have the energy to post succinct coverages to today's current affairs? Just finding out now. Wow. Yeah, so I have another YouTube channel where I actually have been covering all sorts of different topics. We got a lot of YouTube channels we're growing right now. I actually have another one that I started. It's called The Forgotten Hero. And I'm actually going through war stories about unbelievable survival situations, and even some that were heroically killed in combat. Because my father was a Green Beret in the Special Forces, and just my whole life was military household. There's some stories that I just really I love, and I was like, okay, what if I could narrate these in a way and help people kind of understand how, like on that day, the stars lined up. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking I could come up with examples. Anyway, the forgotten hero, it's coming. You'll see those videos start coming out shortly. And also the other one is Finding Out Now, where I'm talking about current issues and stuff too. But MythVision sticks to the Bible and ancient mythology and history and ancient Near Eastern stuff. And I'm going to go to other myths as well and continue growing this thing. This is an ongoing journey that we're on. How do I find the energy? Honestly, I think the energy is my wife and children. They're the
I knew
key.
you were going to say that.
You know me. You know me. I'll hurt myself to take care of them, you know. And but that's because they mean that much, you know. So that's where I find my energy. They motivate me, and they are everything, and that's why I'm, you know, trying my best. You know who has more energy? I know some streamers who go for like 12 hours. I wish I knew how, but I just don't know how to do that 12-hour stuff. Again, JC, Sumerian, Akkadian, Supelu, Hebrew. I don't know how to pronounce, but I think this is pertaining to what was said earlier. Anyway, JC seems to have like serious knowledge. I'd love to read something that they put together, like an article, like of something that they're trying to connect these dots. That would be fascinating because this stuff's like way over my head. And it seems like some of it's over yours, Bob.
Oh, you're not kidding. Yeah.
Yeah,
As the
JC.
heavens are high above the earth, so are my thoughts higher than yours, God says.
Right.
This guy's got it.
Yeah, he's definitely tapping into some linguistic stuff that I have no clue. Mitch McKenzie, again, thank you for the super chat, my friend. I really appreciate it. This is the last one that we got tonight. Is Paul and Thecla pure fandom?
I would assume so, because it's part of a larger genre of encretite Acts of the Apostles. It circulated by itself, but it looks to me like it was originally part of the Acts of Paul. It's the same sort of stuff. The apostle comes into town preaching that you have to give up sex even with your spouse if you're married, because only the celibate will enter the kingdom of God. And in every one of the 5 great apocryphal acts of Paul, Peter, John, Thomas, and Andrew, the same plot happens. The apostle comes into town, preaches this. A bunch of women, are married women or engaged, hear about this and say, okay, this is for me. Sorry, honey, I'm locking the door tonight. And if outraged husbands happen to be close to the governor or king or whoever and say, look, Your Majesty, we got this charlatan gigolo who is alienating the affections of our wives. Can't you do something about this? Gladly. And he claps him into the clink and eventually has him martyred. Every one of these things. And they seem to be kind of a hybrid mutation off of ancient Hellenistic romance novels in many ways. And so that the Paul and Thecla thing is a classic case of that. So it's conceivable. I mean, there were women named Thecla, there were women evangelists and so forth, but I don't see any reason to posit. Could have been, but it's just totally iffy.
I love the Paul and Thecla stuff too. It's such a fun, wild thing. And, you know, modern apologists love to go, the Apostle Paul died for his faith in Jesus and he wouldn't recant. All of the apostles or disciples died because they believed in the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm like, what?
Wait,
Rome wouldn't have gave a crap about you believing in a resurrected dude. What they gave a crap about is you knocking like Jehovah's Witnesses or gathering in large areas when the laws say otherwise, or if you were doing, let's just say that there's some validity to people who are, let's just say there's cults running around telling women what they should and shouldn't do with their husbands, your head's coming off. And sure enough, here's a fiction about it with Paul playing a role. Like, imagine if the modern apologists really gave factual arguments. William Lane Craig tomorrow popped up and said, ladies and gentlemen, The Apostle Paul was decapitated for telling women not to sleep with their husbands. This helps our faith know that it really is historically true. It's like, dude, he just said, don't sleep with your husband. Like, dude, you're going to get your head cut off in Rome in the ancient world if you do that kind of stuff. How does that help your faith again? You got to be a spin doctor, and you got to pretend the reason he really died was because he wouldn't say Jesus didn't rise from the dead. You see what I'm saying? Like, so I just find it ironic that they say that all of them died for this reason. And
it's based on the flimsiest, silliest, apocryphal stuff. There's no other evidence about Paul's death or martyrdom or whatever. I mean, for all we know, he could have died of erotic self asphyxiation or something. A drug overdose, getting run over by a chariot. Who the heck knows? And yet they think they know this stuff, and it's just like medievalism.
Absolutely. Bob, look, we have done 3 on the dot just about. We're literally 1 minute away. So I really appreciate everybody who's been in the chat, all the positivity. I sincerely appreciate that. Yes, Bob is back. I've missed my old friend, and here we are. I wish the internet was perfect so you could see all the wrinkles and all the smiling and all the happiness on his face along the ride here. But again, life is, my advice is when you love people and you have bumps in the road, really try to hear each other out, try to connect and try to hear and listen to them. Don't let the noises that are around deter you from actually trying to do that. And so sometimes we can be wrong, and that's okay. It's okay if we're wrong about things or we make mistakes along the way. I want to encourage people that if there's people out there in this world that you haven't reached out to, you miss, you love, my advice is don't let them be gone and let it be too late before you rekindle that with the people that matter and that you care about. I really do encourage you with that. Bob, you feel the same way? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I sure do. Yeah. I once in a sermon, it was called, Can the Dead Forgive? I said, is it too late with some severed link? You can't shake hands, bury the hatchet. Well, tell you what, I suggest you imagine the person is standing in front of you and ask them for forgiveness. They can't hear it anymore. They don't need to hear it, but you need to say it. Right. And so any kind of gesture of reconciliation is healing.
Absolutely. And that's what's happened. So I really, really appreciate it. I can't wait to have some Holy Ghost chicken with you. When I get it? Gashima baba. Seriously, love you. Everybody, look, stay tuned. Let's get back into business. Let's continue doing what we've been doing all along. Help people find freedom. Help people find purpose. Enjoy these ancient stories, uncover the myths and history, call out the bad stuff that, we shouldn't do along the way, because there's some pretty ugly stuff, but we can learn from it as well. But anyway, I sincerely appreciate your time, Dr. Price. Is there any final words you would like to say to our audience?
Well, just that I love the Bible and all of the associated subject matter, and my whole mission is not to get people to agree with me on any particular theory or about religion, specific ones or in general. I don't want to deprive anybody of their faith. It's none of my business what anybody else believes. And all I try to do is to be Socratic in the sense of providing information and perspectives that similarly interested, curious people may not have run across, so that they can use it to form their own ongoing synthesis. And bon voyage. Wish you well on your voyage of discovery.
I seriously agree, and I hope more people do that. Again, thank you for being positive. Thank you for joining the chat, and let us know in the comments what you think. I really appreciate it. Again, Bob, until next time, never forget, We are
MythVision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.